Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Happy Friday. My name is Molly Kimmel. I am the program director at MontCOMM. And if you're not familiar with MontCOMM, we are your statewide assistive technology program. You will have a chance, that's right, thank you. You will have a chance to see us in action at lunchtime today. And we hope you'll all come over for a little open house to play with some of our equipment and get more familiar with our services. But I just want to take a minute and say thank you. I have been obviously nervous about this event, because how can you not be? I have been mostly excited, and even more excited when I picked these two up from the airport and got to chat with both of them. And then today I'm just grateful. I am so grateful that we get to be here in person for the first time in 3 years. So my first in-person hybrid mix of MontCOMM, which is just awesome. So thank you for making the time in your summer to be here all day long. And I promise we will make it fun, right? Okay. So I just want to recognize the people on Zoom as well, and thank you for signing up. We do have a wonderful representation of the state here, and these are all of the places where you have registered from. So we're doing good. We can do better, right? We're missing a little chunk of the state, and so coming next year, we are going to be implementing a new pilot project which will create some loops around the state so that we can capture more outreach and more delivery of equipment through that middle section of the state. The real big loop, the old 1,200-mile loop, so we'll be delivering equipment and doing outreach throughout these communities as well. And we don't forget about Northwest Montana, so we'll be getting that one too. So stay tuned for a lot of news about how we're going to be reaching more communities so that everybody doesn't all have to come to Missoula and Billings, but we do appreciate it.
Will you be stopping in Troy, or will Troy have to go?
Hey, if you want us to come somewhere, you let me know. That's what this is all about. So we will make it work for the communities, for sure. So MontCOMM, our Alternative Communication Conference, has been going since 2019, and in that time we have served nearly 500 people across Montana. And what I really appreciate about this conference is that we bring together, and you know I love you speech therapists, but this is not just a speech therapist conference, right? This is a chance for people with disabilities, family members, direct support professionals, educators, therapists, counselors, and so many more people to get together in a really beautiful interdisciplinary way. So I just appreciate that this is a chance for all of us to understand that helping people communicate is not any one person's job, but we're building capacity to really be able to serve the person in a team approach. And a couple of shout outs. So thank you to everybody who did group registrations. I'm going to give a little shout out to Vocational Rehab and Blind Services who brought 10 people. Well done. The Clinton Cougars, who is here from Clinton, bravo. You guys have a bunch of people in the house, but our winner this year is the Missoula Developmental Service Corporation, 12 registrations. Thank you very much. So we appreciate that. And you know you get a group discount when you sign up, so next year. As I said, we're gonna have an open house from 12 to 1:15. You're gonna grab a brown bag lunch. Feel free to eat it outside. This is a little loop to our office, a quick one building over, and you can come and join us and have a little open house. We will be there with equipment. And then for those folks on Zoom, please do hop back on at 12:30, and our Maddie Kelly right here will be facilitating a virtual tour using our telepresence robot. So it will be worth waiting for, I believe. And if anybody needs directions to McGill, there will be a contingent of us walking that direction. The map is in your swag, so you've got it there to refer to. And I couldn't do it without these folks. So please, large round of applause and virtual applause for everyone at MonTech. Oh my goodness. When I say I'm grateful, it is because of the work that they do. It's incredible how much energy and heart and talent and skill and knowledge each one of them puts into their work every day. And I am thrilled to be able to work with them and excited to see where the next years come. Business. Okay, those of you here for CEUs, please know that we're checking who's here and online, and you will get your OPI credits. Those of you who had scholarships will get them from either Doug Doty or John Keener, probably sometime next week. I will be sending out non-scholarship OPI credits and MODA credits, and then ASHA credits will be sent out by Julie Vetter. Speech therapists, QR code, use it right now. This is your form. If you want credits, then you need to fill out this form and submit it to Julie. So we will have that available out at the registration booth at lunchtime. It's on Zoom. Maddie's going to pull it up right now and make sure people can grab it, take your picture, fill it out. I will be bugging you about that again later. Okay, that's enough for me. I have nothing left to do for the rest of the day but enjoy these two. So I'm really excited. I don't have to talk anymore. But I am just beyond excited that Chris Bouguet and Rachel Maddle said yes to my request to come to Montana because they don't go many places. We are very special. And I think they've had a good enough time already that they're willing to come back. So,
we'll see what you say at the end.
these two are skilled beyond measure. They're engaging. It's going to be a fun day. I am going to stop talking and just let them have it because I'm so excited to hear what they have to say and learn from them. So thank you. Find me if you have any questions, and it's your show.
All right.
Amazing.
Thank you, Molly.
Awesome. All right.
Oh, wait.
What?
One more thing.
But there's more.
We have to give out a raffle to start the day.
Yeah, let's do prizes.
We do have 3 prizes during the day, so we'll have to figure out when we want to do the next one. But this is for an in-person. Oh, I don't have my sheet. I'm going to find you, whoever you are. This is for one of our gift bags over here, which I believe has one of Chris's newest books that he co-authored, which he might talk about.
I will definitely talk about it.
And a registration for free, or a gift certificate for free registration for next year's MontCOMM. So we had 75 in the room. Zoom, I promise you're going to get your raffle too, but we're going to start with an in-room. And lucky number 60, which I will tell you in 2 minutes who that is. Congratulations, number 60. All right, now I'm done.
All right.
Well, welcome, everybody. Thanks for having us here. Zoom, can you see us okay? Can you put it in the chat? Can you hear us okay? We don't have to, speak louder. You got the microphones work? We want to make sure everyone is included in the presentation, so we want to make sure that the Zoom people can participate as well. So, yeah, all right. Thanks, Haley. Thanks, Bethany. Yes, excellent. Rachel,
All right.
I'm going to roll up my sleeves, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, here we go.
Let's do this.
Get to work, right?
I'm going to toggle on live captions. This is why we use Google Slides, because how fun is this? We can make it, hold on. Allow my microphone, Google. Let's see,
Yes,
is it going to
does
work?
it work now?
Wow, it's at the top. That's not usual. Usually it's at the bottom.
Is that new for anybody?
A new feature. We use it because obviously we want to make things accessible. That's what we're here to talk about today. If I forget to put it back on, remind me.
Call us out.
Call us
The
out.
captions. It's not just for people with hearing impairments, but it's also, we expect throughout a presentation that someone might reach down to their phone and lose just, or think about their life or something like that. And then how do they get back into it? Oh, okay, I can look at the captions and get right back into it. So it's an attention-grabbing technique as well.
Here's the slide deck. So you guys are definitely going to want to get the slide deck. There's tons and tons of resources. Don't be overwhelmed by the number because it's pretty long. But you can use the QR code. You can also use this bit.ly link. We're going to be referring to that a lot today, and you can follow along, and you're going to want to look at it after the fact because we have tons and tons of resources.
And we've got Maddie working on the Zoom, so Maddie's going to put it in there for us. Thanks. Close. Thank you, Maddie, for putting that in there. But we'll just, for a second, anyone want to scan the QR code? The other option is you could take a picture of this slide and then type it in later, right? But if you take a picture, then we want to be in it.
Photo op. All right. So I'm going to let everyone get a picture. And then we're going to talk about us, and also we want to learn about you guys. We have a really eclectic mix here, which we're really excited about. We do a lot of speaking with a lot of speech-language pathologists, which raise your hand if you're at SLP. Got some SLPs in the house, awesome, but we have a lot of different kinds of disciplines here. So we're going to hit this next slide. This is a hyperlink. So it says, tell us a little about yourself. Every time Chris and I present, we like to gear our presentation to the audience that we're in front of. And so this is a way for you to share what your knowledge base is on AAC, a little bit about yourself. We're going to let you guys click on this link and fill this out as we're talking about ourselves briefly. Obviously, there's a QR code, and then you can click the link just as a way for us to kind of get to know who's in the audience. All right, I'm going to start with introductions.
Did everyone get it?
Did everyone get it?
If you had the first QR code, that gets you to all the slides. And
It
then you can
unlocks
just click on links.
everything.
But then you can also get this one, and it'll take you right to the Google form. Those of you in chat, in the Zoom, if you click on the link, then you'll have the whole slide deck, and the slide deck will then have the QR code that you can use, or you can click on the link at the top to the Google form. And then periodically we'll check this and say, okay, what do we need to spend more time on? What can we sort of slide over, because most people know this concept already.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm Rachel Madel. I'm a speech-language pathologist. I geek out on AAC. I do all types of events like this. I love teaching people about AAC. I own a private practice in Los Angeles, which, fun fact, there's a direct flight from LA to Missoula, and I got upgraded to business class. So I was feeling super fancy with my glass instead of plastic on the flight here. I do a lot of speaking events like this. Here are all the ways to connect with me. I'm really active on social media, if you guys are on social media. Here are all my financial disclosures, none of which are incredibly relevant to today. There's a link at the bottom of this slide. It has every financial relationship I've ever been in, if you want to learn more. Again, nothing really relevant to today's talk, but we just like to disclose where our money comes from.
And then this is me, so my name is Chris Bouguet, and it says up there that I'm the Assistive Technology Specialist for Loudoun County Public Schools. So not in these day and ages, I like to say, yes, it's that Loudoun County Public Schools. If you've heard of it in the news of the last 2 or 3 years, that's my school district that has been all over the news. But I am the Assistive Technology Specialist for that school district, and my background is a speech-language pathologist. And even though that's my job title, what I really like to think of myself as is somebody who works in inclusive design. I like to think of myself as an inclusive design facilitator. So what that means is that I work with educators, all different types, to design inclusive experiences as opposed to have an experience and then fix it for people that it might not work for. So that's what I do. I've had the great fortune to write a couple books over the years. So the most recent book is called, the most recent solo venture is called The New Assistive Tech, Make Learning Awesome for All. And the most recent collaborative effort in that is, I think, the book that you were saying, who's number 60?
It was a Clinton Cougar.
Woo!
One of the Cougars.
And it was, let me just double check what our name was. Sarah O'Neill.
Sarah O'Neill, congratulations, wins a copy of Inclusive Learning. Thank you for getting it. Inclusive Learning 365 EdTech Strategies for Every Day of the Year. And what that is 3 other authors, Karen Janowski, Mike Murata, and Beth Poss, and myself, are put together a book that is exactly what it sounds. There's a little chapter at the beginning about having an inclusive mindset, and then the rest of the book is one strategy per page about designing inclusive experiences. So there's definitely stuff about AAC embedded within, but it's much larger than that. So I got to write a couple books. And then I feel like there's something else, Rachel. I don't.
Something else that we do. What's that other thing that we do?
The other thing we do is a podcast together called Talking with Tech. So, and my disclosures were on that as well. So the Talking with Tech podcast. Sorry, I think I'm just a little distracted because is anyone else hot in here? Feels like it, yeah. Maybe it's because I'm wearing it. You have a nice like T-shirt, so
I
maybe
know,
I'm just
I'm
gonna,
like easy breezy over
I'm
here.
just gonna take off my shirt here, and because it's a little.
It's so hot.
Look what I'm wearing underneath, Rachel.
Oh my
Surprise!
gosh, twinsies! Twinsies.
We both wore black jeans too.
I know, we're literally, it's not usually this twinsy.
Yeah.
We're really like wearing our uniform proud. Raise your hand if you guys have heard of Talking with Tech or listen. Amazing.
How about in the
Awesome.
chat?
Put it in the chat, you guys. Do you guys know about Talking with Tech? It's a completely free resource. Chris and I have been doing the podcast for
Almost 5 years.
That's insanity.
Yeah.
I cannot believe it's been 5 years. We record every week. We talk all about AAC. Typically in the beginning of an episode, Chris and I are kind of sharing a story or just having a little banter discussion, and then we dive into an interview. We've had the most amazing people on our podcast, leaders in our field, parents, clinicians, AAC users, researchers, you name it. If they have something to do with AAC, we've asked them to come on our podcast. And I feel so grateful to be able to do this work and to learn from everyone in our field who's doing amazing things. So definitely, if you haven't checked out the podcast, we would love for you to go to our website.
Thanks, Christina and Bethany and Bonnie. Thanks for checking it out. Again, if it's new to you, thanks for checking it out. One of the things I think that we bring that's a little bit unique in the podcasting space is that, like Rachel said, she works in private practice, and I work for a public school. You're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast. So despite these different sort of backgrounds and where we work, we are very aligned in our thinking when it comes to AAC. And so I think it helps to show how we can have discussions from these different lenses.
Yeah, and Chris, you work mostly with professionals in the schools and a little with families, and I work mostly with families and a little professionals in the schools. So we really do have this unique experience where we can kind of share and give ideas and insight.
Mm-hmm. Now let's just say there for a second that both of our experiences are mostly with kids and working with schools and working with families in schools, but I know some people in here are working with adults, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, raise your hand if you're working with adults.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
So a lot of the principles that we're going to be talking about today stretch well beyond just working with kids, right? We're going to be talking about picture symbols and what those are like. And we're going to be talking about language in general. And when we get to chances are we're going to be talking about phrasal verbs. These are things that'll again will stretch across the lifespan. The only thing we probably won't be touching about is end of life. That's nothing either Rachel and I really specialize in. So that's probably something we won't talk about. But we do have podcast episodes on it. In fact, one of our, Gail Van Tatenhove is probably the most famous SLP in the world regarding AAC. And her podcast episode is all about end of life. So there's strategies for you to go back and listen to if that's something you're interested in.
All right. Now, there's one more QR code. Get excited. So Padlet is a way for us to share resources and also for you guys to put in your questions. If you are listening to us talk about something and a question pops up, feel free to raise your hand. Like, this is the kind of thing where if you want, to get a question answered in real time, we'll go there with you. But you can also put it in the Padlet. There's a column. We can click on it so you guys can see what this looks like. I'll let everyone get the QR code first. But we're going to be asking you to share in the Padlet. All of our friends on Zoom can share in the Padlet. It's just another resource that you can use. I have to tell you, Padlet has been a game changer for my practice. I pay for the premium version because I organize all of my therapy resources. I do a lot of work with families. I do a lot of coaching of communication partners. And for each one of the families that I work with, I have a Padlet. I have a Padlet all about AAC and literacy, and I send that to families. So it's a great tool, actually, for a collection of resources. So I don't get any money from Padlet, but it is a really useful tool.
Anyone else using Padlet?
Heard of Padlet?
Is it a new tool for some of you?
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think when you start to play with it, you're really going to like it. So I'm a veteran, I'm old.
He
And
is.
it used to be called Wall Wisher back in the day. And so when I signed up for it originally, I got the original version, had tons that you could do for free. And so I had tons of Padlets that, so I don't have to pay for the version.
You
'cause
got
I'm
grandfathered in.
I'm grandfathered in.
I pay monthly. All right, so our Padlet, I can click on this. I'm a Mac user, you guys, so if I'm fumbling over here, it's because I'm not PC literate. Okay, so you see some of the questions that we're gonna ask, but if you just have a general question, just click on this, put it in there, and then we'll periodically look at this and make sure that we answer all your questions, because that's the benefit of being with each other, is we can answer all the questions that come up for you guys. All right, let's go back over here. Wow, it stays with my live captions.
All right.
That's great. All right, so we love when people tag us on social media. You guys can take pictures of the slides, all the things. The only thing I ask is that when I'm sharing videos of sessions, not to record those or take pictures of those. I have very specific permissions from families for educational purposes only. So everything else is free game. You can put my face all over social media, but just not my clients.
Fair?
All right, Chris, what are we doing today?
Okay, this is the general outline. We know you got the awesome card. Where's our card? Is it under your
It's
iPad?
here. I got it.
Yeah.
I don't have it.
That has the agenda.
It's right here.
So this is the agenda for the day. But that said, Rachel and I do a podcast every week where we talk at an audience, and it's a one-way sort of conversation. Of course, people go on Facebook and people write us, and we have some interaction, but really it's a one-way. So we are not big fans of flying out to a place to talk at you. We could do that every week. Let's talk with you, right? And so if we get into a conversation here about something and you have questions, awesome. Same thing with you, chat. Chat, if you have questions, Maddie is here to say, hey, Chris, Rachel, there's a question in chat. Can you talk about it? And we'll talk about it together. It's okay if we don't stick to the exact agenda here, so we can go deeper in certain subjects or skate on other ones. Does that sound fair?
In fact, we can guarantee we won't stick to the agenda. At least that's our track record.
But we invite participation.
All right, let's look at the results, Chris.
Okay.
It's gonna be great. All right. You always have to coach me through this. How do I do this? How do I get to
I think you just scroll down.
Oh, scroll down?
Yeah.
And we're scrolling.
There we go.
And
I think what I like to look at is these.
Yes, this pie chart.
Yes, this
Is that
pie
It's
chart.
not a pie chart. It's not a pie. Bar graph.
Bar graph.
Wow, that took me back. All right. All right, Chris.
Okay, so core vocabulary. Most people have heard of it but don't know much about it. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about core vocabulary. Right, Rachel?
Yep.
Where some people are feeling like a little more confident in that. Motor planning, same deal. Look, that's almost identical. Snug. I have no idea what this is. You know what? We should probably start somewhere around snug then.
Yeah.
You know, because that's one of the foundational things.
Yeah.
The least dangerous assumption. Again, a lot of people haven't heard that. So excellent. You're in the right room. We're in the right room.
Yes, we're
Gosh,
excited.
it would be so bad if these were all green. We're like, what are we going to talk about today?
What will we talk about for 6 hours?
Excellent. Aided language stimulation, also mostly blue. So great. We have great. This is perfect. Descriptive teaching, a little bit in the red. Okay, so that's good. Phrasal verbs. Again, most people haven't heard of it. Core themes. No one's heard. I cannot believe no one's heard of core themes.
So weird.
The reason you haven't heard of it is this is a term I made up.
You haven't heard about it yet.
But we're
going to
make it a
from
thing.
him.
It's going to become a thing. You're going
It's
to be like,
going to be trending.
I was
you just
there.
Wait.
Yeah, it's coming. Especially when you hear what it is, and that kind of makes sense. So I think it makes sense. But we'll see what you think at the end. Specific language system first approach. No one's heard of it. That's another thing. All right, cool. Coaching, a little bit more knowledge in that area. We plan on spending some of the afternoon coming back from lunch to really digging into coaching and what that really means and how it could really transform the work that you do in any level, right? Prompting hierarchy, what do you think, Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, we have kind of a mixed audience, which is great. Ooh, micro resolutions.
Maybe we don't have to spend as much time on the prompting hierarchy. Let's look, like the blue is low, but okay, a lot on micro resolutions. Okay.
All right, cool.
All right, excellent.
That's helpful for us.
So it
All
looks
right.
like snug, and that piece is one of the first things. Okay. All right, so with this question up here, it says, what are some of the universal truths? But before we ask that question, Rachel and I were sitting having coffee this morning as we walked over here, and we said, what we really need to start with is a different question than this. So ignore this slide. Let's just talk. What are some of the biggest myths that you hear out there in AAC?
You're like listening to someone, you're like, oh no,
don't know that
that's not
jives.
true. Go ahead.
That use of AAC decreases verbal.
Yes.
The use of
Nailed it.
AAC decreases verbal speech is a myth, right? In fact, what we know is that what all the research shows us is that it's just the opposite, is that if verbal speech is in the cards for somebody, then AAC is going to bring that forth even faster, right? It helps everyone, hurts no one, right? So, excellent. Myth. What about, in chat, feel free to put your responses in there. We're looking at you.
I was going to say,
Let's see,
chat, we're waiting for you.
Another myth.
That you have to use no tech or low tech first before introducing high tech.
Yes.
Yes.
Preach. You're speaking our love language.
Yes. Yes. So a myth is that you have to use no tech or low tech first, and then you can try high tech. No, you don't have to wait. You can, in fact, go right to high tech. Another way of saying that, too, is we're a fan of the word robust, right? So you don't have to try a simple AAC system with only a few words. You can go right to trying something with lots of words for any client.
Crystal in the chat is saying kids with low cognition cannot use AAC.
Again, what a fantastic myth, right?
Yes.
Cognition and AAC use are not really linked at all.
No.
In fact, we know a lot of really verbal people that are really not like smart at all. like politicians.
Ain't that the truth? I'm trying to see. There's a language level prerequisite for AAC. Yeah, another myth. How will someone who's non-speaking learn language without AAC, right? How could we possibly expect the language to be there without access? Anything else?
Other myths. They have to be a certain age. Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
That's a complete myth. You can start with a 2-year-old, right? Why not? Why wouldn't you? We do baby sign. Why wouldn't we do AAC? We could totally do that. And then the cousin to that myth that is very similar is they're too old. They're 18 years old. We can't try it. It's too old. 18? What? Like, come on. That's still very young. There's still a whole life in front of you. So, yeah, there's no age requirement or hindrance to just try AAC. Try it. Right?
Anything else?
How about anyone else in the chat? Chat? Any other myths?
Ooh, Bethany. AAC is only for individuals who are nonverbal. I'm going to talk a lot today about a lot of autistic individuals that I work with who have plenty of verbal speech, but lots of echolalia and not really functional, and how I use AAC with that population. So yes, Bethany, excellent.
These are all great myths. So now let's get to the question that's on the screen. Let's flip it and say, okay, so if those are the myths, then what are some things that of the people who are the stakeholders in AAC, the support network for AAC, professionals and people who use AAC and family members, what would we say are some universal truths that we generally all agree that this is a thing for AAC? We should do this, or we should be thinking in this way. Yes?
One size does not fit all.
One size does not fit all. Yeah, that's a pretty universal truth, not just for AAC, but for just about anything when it comes to education, right? Is that there might be, I'll make this argument, there might be a one size fits most, but there's never a one size fits all. There's always going to be customizations and individualizations that are necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Model, yes.
Love it.
Now, for those of you that are in the Google form and you got to aided language stimulation and you're like, what's aided language stimulation? I don't know anything about that. That's what you're getting at is model. Someone needs to see and experience and be around someone using the AAC to learn how to use the AAC.
The AAC user should
Aha, say that again, nice and loud.
Oh, the AAC user needs to have access to what they want to say, not just what we think they should say.
Yes, the AAC user should have some voice and choice into what they want to say, not just what we think they should say. Like we couldn't just put on a communication device, I want pizza, and because we think they're just going to want pizza for their whole life, right? It's like there should be much more than that. Yeah, absolutely.
Along the same lines, AAC is not just for requesting.
Uh-huh.
It's a big one.
Yeah. Multiple pragmatic functions. In fact, all of the pragmatic functions, right? But we often start with requesting and then we get stuck there. How did come on in the...
Did it come up on the live captioning?
Oh, and look, someone put, so that was you, Maddie, just reiterating in the chat. Gotcha. AAC provides communication access for all. It really does, right?
Cora has a question in the chat about picture exchange. We're going to get there, Cora. Don't worry, we will talk about it.
I'll just read it out so people can process it right now. Is PEX a worse option than an AAC device in those who have plateaued in using PEX? Well, what do you think, Cora? Put your answer in the chat. Or anyone else, too, by the way. You can put your answer in the chat as well. Other universal truths? All right, I think that's pretty good. That's a pretty good start, right? So what you just participated in is something that has been done and actually cataloged a handful of times. So there's a conference that happens every year down in Florida called ATIA, the Assistive Technology Industry Association Conference. Anyone been? Yes, right? Okay.
Amazing.
Did you participate in this? You attended, but not, okay. So what this is on the Friday of this particular conference, there's a thing that sort of wraps up the Friday afternoon thing called an Ed Camp. And what an Ed Camp is, anyone participate in an Ed Camp? I gotta tell you what an Ed Camp is. So here today, or when you go to a conference, you've been to ASHA or any big conference, what you're going to talk about is already prescripted, right? It's like these are the sessions, and then you go and you pick out what sessions you want to talk about. What an Ed Camp is people gathering in a space, and then they have a wall, and you say, I really want to talk about universal design. And you write it on an index card, or if it's digital, you type it into a Padlet sort of thing, and you slap it up on the wall. And someone else says, I really want to talk about vocational rehab, and you put that up on the wall. These people just gather with similar interests, and you put these topics up on the wall. And then you say, okay, the people that want to talk about UDL, they're going to go to this room, or they're going to go in this part of the room, and you're going to talk about it for 15, 20, 30 minutes, however the Ed Camps are designed a little differently, but however the time is. And you just get in a group, and you talk about that topic, whatever it might be. So at ATIA, at this Ed Camp, we got together, and we said, a couple of us, Chris Chikosco-Kelly and Sean Pearson and myself, said, we want to talk about these universal truths. What are the AAC agreements? What are some things, you get a bunch of AAC people together and they're going to have their disagreements about little things, but what is something we all agree on? So we can put that out there, mostly for families, but other professionals that are just learning about AAC. So we did. We got together a handful of times at different conferences, and we built a website with what everybody said. And that website is called the AAC Agreements. And what people have said of these agreements is that they go to this website and they use this as sort of the first thing they might give to parents, family members, teachers, other professionals, private practice, or private practice giving it to the school-based person or whatever institution you're working for, saying this is stuff we all agree upon. We don't have to argue about this, right? This is what the profession sort of all agrees. And it's broken down into two subjects. There's stuff that has research supported behind it. So the research says this, and this is why we believe this. And then there's others that's good practice, but we don't have enough research yet. So if any of you are looking for your, want to get into your PhD, or you want something to research, go to this website, look through that list, and be like, oh yeah, everyone seems to agree. Where's the research backing it up? Let's go do some research to see if if we can get the research to back it up. Cool, is that a good resource? Anyone use it before or seen it? So look, a new resource for most people. Anyone in the chat used it before? Cora says, that we're talking about that PECS thing again. Cora says, I'm just curious which would be best for a student I have. He could care less about PECS.
That's pretty much the experience of most of the kids that I've met. And adults, actually.
Yeah. We're not big PECS fans, but you're going to hear why in some of the upcoming slides.
It's all going to make sense soon.
Yeah. All right, so today we're going to be talking about selection, implementation, really some of the consideration. This is sort of what we're going to be talking about today. But the other thing we wanted to kind of start off with is social media is huge right now, right? I mean, we do a podcast, we got Instagram, Facebook, you're all on Instagram.
TikTok, don't forget TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
Should we? Shall we?
So there's lots of information out there. Is anyone on the Facebook group AAC for the SLP? Okay. So this is another resource for you if you're a Facebook sort of person. It's actually a really great Facebook group started by someone named Christine Bawden. And there's lots of great questions that are posed on there. And then people will comment underneath these questions. So Cora could have write the same question as PECS worst option, might write that in the Facebook group. And then all these people in this group, right, will respond with comments. The problem is there's lots of resources shared and lots of opinions shared. And so you have to have a little bit of a barometer of like, what should I believe in? What should I spend some time in? And what is sort of my, I'm going to say it, my BS detector, right? Like, I'm not sure I see it that way, or I'm not sure I should invest my time in that because my red flags are going off, right? This is a question that we want to ask you is, how do you know when you're listening to a podcast, when you're on Instagram and you see a great reel, when you're in this Facebook group or any Facebook group and someone shares something, or you're at a conference like this and you hear people talking, how do you know a strategy that is being shared is valid? What are some of your criteria for that?
For me, when I'm knowing people that I'm getting the information from, having done the research to see, what their thoughts and backgrounds and education is.
All right, what I'm hearing you say is I listen to other professionals that talk about this. So is that a fair summary of what you're, yeah. So there's other professionals that are doing this. Let's see what they have to say. What do you think? Is that fair? I mean, we're here. I hope, right? I mean, it's fair. I think that's fair. Okay, do you think it's fair?
I think it's fair. Yeah. What else?
Bethany says, and Trisha, show me the research. I could totally see Trisha like Tom Cruise. Show me the research, right? So the research and the evidence and data to back it up. So what is the science saying about the validity of this, this strategy? Is that also fair? All right, that's cool. Anything else? Yes?
You have a peer that's actually used it and can give you information that it actually.
When you say, he said, what's your name? Daryl. Daryl, you said when I have a peer that actually used it. When you say peer, do you mean like a professional colleague? Yeah, so it's a colleague that says, this really works for me, you should try it as well, right? Yeah, and that probably falls in that camp of are other professionals using it and what's their experience, for sure. Anything else? Trying it yourself, okay, it sounds like, let me see what my experience is with it, for sure.
User perspective.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yes, this is the third piece. So it's what a user themselves has said worked for me or for us as a representative of a population. So a great example of this is if some of you have your phones here, and of course, chat, right? You could open up another tab, right? If you were to do a quick Google search for electroshock therapy, you've seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? Or something, you've seen, American Horror Story. Like, I know, it's horrible. Look at your face. Look at her. She's like, ugh, I can't even think about it, right? Right? But you know what I'm talking about, right? You put in the shocks, and right? Well, if you did a Google search, what's the research behind that? Guess what you're going to find? It actually works. It actually works to treat whatever the ailment is that they're trying to treat. And so So the research, the evidence says it works. And then can you certainly find other professionals that, especially in the 40s and 50s, that were shocking people? Yes. So that's why those two criteria alone, that's a great example of how if it's just those two, what you can't find is anyone that's like, yeah, can you shock me more? That's what I need. Can you want to shock me? Like, no one wants that, right? And so this is why we have to listen to the user perspective, and why it's so great that you brought that up. And it's also why, back to Cora's question, it's one of the things that, at least for me, Rachel, I think maybe you too, that drove us away from PECS. Because I certainly was PECS trained. I certainly did lots with PECS in my early years as a professional, as speech language pathologist turned assistive technology person. And then I looked at the adults, and I can't find anybody who, one, uses PECS as an adult, but of course, okay, maybe it was a gateway to learning something, but said that's the strategy. Thank you for giving me that strategy. That is what worked for me. We have, not only do I not know anybody, we have a podcast with thousands of listeners, and multiple times on the podcast we've said, if you know somebody, we'll ask you. We'll ask you out there in chat, if you know an adult that can come back and say, PECS was the thing that helped me, then I'll change my mind. Rachel, our minds are open, we're willing to listen, but we can't find a single person that has said it's helped them. Parents, maybe, right? Some other professionals, maybe, but again, that's a little sus, right? You know what I mean by sus?
Actually, fun fact, Chris taught me what the word sus means on our podcast. I was like, what is he saying?
From among us, because my kids taught me what sus.
You're so cool, Chris.
None. Look, Deb put it in. Deb, we can all see it. None, right. So that was one of the things that moved us away. But one of the things we have to listen to is people who have made it out of school, who are adults, who have developed their way of using AAC. They can tell us what has worked for them. And so all we have to do is listen, right? Which is one of the reasons why we do the podcast.
Speaking of, well, before we head in there, this evidence-based practice, for all our SLPs, this is ASHA's website that we posted, but it has this triangle. So oftentimes when you're stuck in a situation where you're trying to advocate for an individual that you're working with, talking about the user experience is part of evidence-based practice. So I think that's a helpful resource that many people don't realize that's even available to them.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
should we use a mic?
I might need a mic.
We can, is there? We love that you have stuff to say.
We got one.
It's not just us, guys. This is a shared collective experience.
So one of the things that I've noticed that I would love for you guys to touch on, and maybe this happens in other states, but Montana is kind of rural, and we don't have a lot of conferences we can go to. So when an AAC conference comes, or a specific app or a specific tool, like PECS, that is adopted, and that is what schools say they will do, and that is what they want to do for every student. And so as an ATP for Montana, I just would love for that to be just kind of talked about a little bit, that there is just so many apps out there, and there's so many options out there that you go to one conference, it's not what has to work for every student.
For sure. So I think we're going to get into that a little bit in when we talk about, and it seems like a lot of people haven't heard of it, the specific language system first approach. So I might suggest that it's okay to pick something to start with as long as it has certain criteria, like it's robust.
Which we're going to define what that means.
Yeah. So I think it's okay. Do you think it's okay?
Yeah, I think we're going to touch on that a little bit. I'll share in the, I guess in the chat, I'll share, when we take a lunch break, I will put it in the Padlet. I have a talk on early intervention in AAC, and in that talk, I created a Padlet, and it talks about it has a series of questions that you can ask someone specifically about picture exchange. Also resources that can kind of talk about how problematic it can be. So I'll share that, but I think we are going to touch on it today for sure. Because I'm sure that's a challenge, a roadblock, right? Is like, I hear you, Rachel and Chris, like, yes, we need robust language systems for the individuals that we're working with. But, you know, it's hard to kind of undo a system that's been done for years and years and years. It's hard to start something new when people are familiar with what they've always known and they've always done it this way. So we're gonna have a breakout session soon, just where we can kind of get in groups and talk. And I feel like that could be a place where we touch on some of the stuff.
Yes. Oh. Here, I can run the mic.
Chris loves running during
I
our
like that.
presentations.
Well, the Zoom has already thanked us for using the mic. So
Zoom needs us.
I think one of the biggest roadblocks I've found is colleagues, especially paraprofessionals and special education teachers, not believing in AAC unless they've seen it in the past being used successfully.
Yes.
And they're like, well, it was pro lo quo, so we have to use that because that's the only thing I've seen, and that's the only thing that clearly works.
Yes.
And so it's frustrating. So I was wondering if maybe in the course of the day you could help us access some videos, if there are any, that show AAC usage and the progression of early use to more advanced use so we can demonstrate the power of AAC to colleagues and parents.
okay, can I comment on?
Yeah.
So there, the answer is yes. There is videos out there on YouTube of people showing what works, and AAC users that have sort of come out in the end with being able to say whatever they want to say, however they want to say it, right? The problem is there's not enough and they're not organized really well. So this is a great challenge for all of you. You know somebody that when we describe later on what that really robust and what snug means. Like, we need more examples because there's not enough. We have tried to do our due diligence with having these people on the podcast. So that's something you get like, oh, the way this person is describing themselves is just like my kid or the kid that I work with or this family that I work with, so that we could be like, and if one person can do it, then another person can do it, right? If another team was able to support them and they won in the end, then we can do that too.
And these are the episodes that I share with families because you're exactly right. If you don't understand what the end game looks like, it just feels like so daunting and so challenging. And so throughout the day, we're going to sprinkle these slides in. We have at least 12 episodes, if not more at this point, with AAC users.
I just recorded one on Monday. It's gonna be
What? A new one?
Yeah, a new one.
13, you guys. Super excited. Is there a
Daryl?
question?
Daryl, right? Yeah.
Daryl, just 1 minute.
I should have got you when you were right there, instead of making you run across the room. Hi, so my question kind of goes along with schools kind of get stuck in a rut with what they're doing. Well, myself and at least 9 other people that are in this are part of vocational rehabilitation. And so we work with people that transitioning from school to the world of work and those kinds of things. So my question is, like, should we continue with the technology that they've always used, or should we, like, look at other options? Or, I mean, ours is always client choice, client voice. They are the chooser, but should we, like, get involved in that and say, hey, there are other alternatives? Should we look at any of these things, or should we just leave it alone?
That's a really easy answer. And that answer is maybe. You know, come on, it depends. But here's what it depends on. And it depends on whether it's, I'm going to put this in quotes, working, right? So if they're stuck in requesting and they've had this for years and all they're saying is, I want pizza and I want goldfish cracker, I'm looking at you, right? Because you had said the pragmatics, and then they get stuck in that, then maybe it's not working. But if there's a different picture of where we want to go, then maybe it is, we got to change it up. And then there's also, again, this is like great foreshadowing, is what makes a good system, right? That would be something that would, and what does it look like when, in the end, that would be a good picture of somebody. So you can then look at when the way you described it makes me think you have kids that are between 18 and 23, and they're moving from high school into another phase of their life. So again, back to the point of age, like, it's not too late. Let's look at the supports around it. Let's look at what that looks like. So the answer is it depends, but You might stick with it, depending if it meets a lot of the criteria we're going to talk about today. But if it's like a really terrible system, then no, let's punt it and go to something different.
I have a question that goes on.
Here comes the mic.
Attached to
That?
with the, so I agree that there's a definite block in getting buy-in from other people on whatever they like, what they like, and this is what we've always done, and we're not going to change. And I am a paraprofessional, and I've taken it upon myself to get education on my own to be able to better suit my students. How does someone that doesn't have that professional teaching
Convince others?
Yeah, convince others. How do we, they have named me the AAC communication specialist because for 2 years now, I've been going to these conferences and trying to figure out how to get a better system for our students. How are we, any suggestions on how we can communicate that to the powers that be?
Well, we have a whole activity, or just based around exactly
Yeah,
that question.
it's coming up.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
just
we're all
hold
gonna
that
talk.
one
We're all
second.
gonna talk about it.
There's one last comment I want to make on the previous slide, if that's okay.
Sure.
See that link? It says evidence-based practice, right? And Rachel specifically mentioned there's this triangle in ASHA with these 3 components. That's ASHA's definition. But so what often happens in education and beyond is that we use this term, evidence-based practice, but different professionals define it differently. So defining what that really means in the table that you're working with, right? Your ABA people have a different definition of evidence-based practice. They are certainly not thinking they're not necessarily thinking about, because their definition doesn't include that last piece about the user perspective. So it's a list of 22 evidence-based strategies that this organization has deemed evidence-based, right? So we have to start with a conversation. If we're going to have a conversation about getting on the same page, well, it's evidence-based. Well, what does that really mean to you? Because to us, it means these 3 things.
All right. Who's that guy?
We're not
Who is
gonna watch.
it?
We're not going to watch that video. We have tons of videos. Some of them we're going to watch, mostly in the afternoon, about Rachel's clients. These other videos are for you to go back and watch later, or Zoom if you want to click on them now and watch them in another window or whatever. But the concept up on the screen is called the least dangerous assumption. And that was one of our things in the Google form. And it sounds like a lot of people hadn't heard about this. So the least dangerous assumption is an article that was written by someone named Ann Donnellan and expounded upon by someone named Cheryl Jurgensen. And the general gist of the article is that when we don't have enough information to make a decision about a client or a person, what interventions we might put in place or what strategies we might use to help, we choose to make the least dangerous assumption. What of the options that we're going to provide is going to be least dangerous? And this is a great barometer for every choice you ever have to make for any person you work with of any age and any population. Should we do this or should we do this? Well, what's going to be the least dangerous, right? Let's make the choice that's the least dangerous. And let's make an assumption that is least dangerous to the client. Sound fair? Okay. Where this comes from is a scientific principle called the Pygmalion effect. So once upon a time, there was this guy named Rosenthal. And Rosenthal was this researcher that took 2 sets of rats. Does anyone know the Rosenthal experiment? Have heard of it? It's new. You've heard of it? Some of you have heard of it? Okay, so tell me if I got it right. Takes 2 sets of rats, and both sets of rats are going to run through a maze, which are exactly the same. So same bunch of rats, same maze, right? Then he's going to have a bunch of researchers time how fast they get through the maze, right? So it's exactly the same. The only variable is that he told the researchers, this group of rats, put a big label on it, are the smart rats. And these rats over here, these are the non-smart rats. Only variable. They're the same rats, right? He just lied to the people who are timing it, right? Which rats made it through the maze faster? Yes. They're not smart rats. They're the same rats, right? They're just labeled smart, right? So what does that mean? Then they replicated this with students at a school, same deal. The ones that were, that it wasn't even the language used with them. It was just the label we put on them that these are the smart ones, did better than the ones that were not labeled that way. And so that is called the Pygmalion effect. Yes?
I live by this.
Mike.
Kind of the same principle is one of my favorite things to say to people is you will get exactly what you expect out of the kids that you're working with, or horses or dogs or adults, children, your dentist.
Yes.
You know, and I am a firm believer in you get exactly what you expect.
The fish will only grow as big as the bowl, so put them in the ocean, right?
And
Yeah.
how often do we, observe or even ourselves put labels on the individuals that we're working with, and we put limits on them without knowing. So it's just something to be cognizant of. We're going to talk today. One of our activities is, what do we say to kind of a non-believer? But the whole idea here is that the belief in change, the belief that with the right tool and the right, communication partner training and implementation of a tool, that all students, individuals can learn how to communicate. We have to start with that belief, right?
Because it's the least dangerous assumption, right? Same thing when we were talking about those myths over here. You had mentioned, someone over here had mentioned that you don't have to start, and someone put it in the chat, you don't have to start with low tech, and it's not going to hurt you. The very first myth, you said it in the corner there, right? Is that it hurts nobody, right? So it's the least dangerous assumption, especially since we know the research supports that it doesn't hurt anybody. It only helps them, right? So why not start early with a robust language system? Okay, so which is the least dangerous assumption, right? That there are prerequisites for high-tech, robust AAC, or there's no. What do you think?
Green or yellow?
Top or bottom?
We just confused them. We told them to do two separate things. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so we kind of already went through some of the myths, but I think oftentimes, especially if we're putting a high-tech speech-generating device in front of an individual, we just talked about expectations. We expect for them to be able to use it, right? We say, oh, we finally got this amazing tool that we can put in front of an individual, and wow. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I'm wowed by the individuals that I'm working with. But oftentimes, we need practice, we need exposure, we need patience, we need all of these things. And so the key here is that, when I'm going into a situation where I'm trying to put a AAC system in front of an individual, I'm really trying to figure out, how I can customize that and customize my approach instead of this idea of, can they do it? Can they do it now? Obviously, we're kind of assessing as we go along, but this idea of teaching before we test, right? Communication should not be a test for individuals. It's our job as educators to work alongside of individuals and really help them learn. And if it's not working, then we need to fix what we're doing with individuals. And I think oftentimes it's really easy to be like, well, they're just too low, or they're just too distracted, or they're just too anything, fill in the blank, right? It's really on us as educators to take the onus and say, okay, how can I shift what I'm doing? How can I find things that are more motivating? Maybe I need to tweak some things here. So the idea is that we just have to stop testing, and we have to teach first. And then we kind of already talked on some of these when we were talking about myths. Obviously, the first two signs that, and this says child, but put individual in there. Completely non-speaking. Okay, that makes sense to us, right? Like no access to verbal speech. Sure, AAC feels like it makes perfect sense. Speech intelligibility is so decreased that we have a really hard time hearing and understanding that verbal speech. The last two, I think, are not as well known. And someone mentioned it in the chat, which I'm excited about. Vocabulary of less than 50 words. 50 words is nothing in a vocabulary. what can you do with 50 words? And most of them, I'm guessing, are nouns for a lot of the individuals we're thinking about right now. So, limited vocabulary, severely limited vocabulary. AAC is a great idea. And then number 4, I kind of referenced this in the beginning. Many of the students that I work with in my practice are autistic. Many of them have verbal speech, but most of them are just repeating me, and they're not really generating their own language. They're not really formulating on their own. AAC can be an incredibly valuable tool to teach students and individuals how to formulate. It slows down the process for students. Our speech is ephemeral. It's fleeting. As soon as I say something, it's gone. And if your ear didn't grasp it and didn't process it, which many of the students that I work with, their auditory processing it's hard for them. They're visual, right? AAC slows down that process. We now have a message window that we can keep referring back to. The same way when we're writing an email, we're referring back to what we already wrote, and then we continue to move forward. So this can be an incredibly valuable tool. Just because individuals have verbal speech doesn't mean they can't really benefit from a high-tech speech generating device in AAC.
Now, one that's not on there, but we like to add, is to think, again, to the very first thing we said at the beginning, that you said in the corner, is that if AAC hurts nobody and helps everybody, then anytime anyone says, I don't know, I think that person might need AAC, then they need AAC. You don't have to discuss it any farther. It just becomes the question of what type and how, what are you going to put in place? They need it, because why wouldn't you? Right? There's no reason. And in fact, a reinforcement of that is the Alyssa Hillary Zisk episode, one of them. We have two. But Alyssa, they say that they, like 98% of the time it's verbal. They use verbals, but occasionally it's just like, today's not a words day, or this moment's not a words moment. I just need my tool, right? Right?
Yep, this idea of part-time AAC use. So Alyssa Hillary Zisk and Brittany Dubé, we have 3 episodes that we've done where they talk about their experience, that sometimes verbal speech does not come. When they're dysregulated, when they're in a speaking situation that they're not comfortable in. And so, oftentimes it's hard to get buy-in when we're thinking about, well, this kid can talk, or this individual talks. Yes, right now they have access to verbal speech. But again, if we're listening to AAC users, if we're listening to autistic adults, we're hearing that that's not always the case. And it's always a case with access. And that's the way I talk about it with families, with educators. It's an access issue. And sometimes, I'm working with some of my students and I'm like, wow, it's like a verbal day today. Like, we're not really even using this device. And other days, they're not using any verbal communication. They're relying on our backup system. And so it's just so important to think about this idea of part-time AAC use. And I love those episodes because we can hear it directly from autistic individuals, what that feels like in that moment of, I can't access my verbal speech right now. But we're living in a world where we now have technology that we can pull out and use so that we're consistently able to communicate and connect with the people that are around us.
Just a couple comments from the chat to share with everybody. Kay Betts says, thanks for defining evidence-based practice. It's been their experience as well, that it's different organizations and different professions define it differently. And then Sean goes on to say that Sean seems to be a parent that talks about how they've had a child that is, since 2 years old, had pro lo quo, but the support network has all been PECS, and won't really use it. And so this parent is trying to find someone who will actually support their use. So again, everyone's eager to get to how do we change mindsets? So.
Yeah, especially around PECS.
Yeah.
We might have to have a whole breakout discussion, I feel like, and talk about it.
One good strategy is share the podcast. Right? That might open up some, because we talk about that explicitly.
And when we talk about motor planning, which was again on that Google form, that's my biggest issue with picture exchange. So teaser for later.
Yeah, foreshadowing.
All right, we're gonna do a little activity, you guys, because this is a roadblock, right? Everyone in this room is at some level invested in AAC. You guys came to this, you're like, okay, an AAC training, I wanna learn how to be a better communication partner, a better educator. But there's people that we come across in our day-to-day work that don't believe, right? That don't agree, that have every excuse in this under the sun of why AAC isn't necessary, or we don't need it, or So we thought we would all kind of break into small groups. How many people?
Whatever they want, I think. Well, you
Yeah,
figure it out.
Yeah, for creative license. You guys can break into groups. We're going to talk about what do we say. So we have the Jamboard here. We're going to pull the Jamboard up. And then we can also kind of have people talk. You can share in the chat, put in the Jamboard. We're going to discuss, like, what do we say when someone, says, oh, I don't think he needs AAC.
Yeah, chat, clearly you're probably not going to get in small groups unless you are participating, like, hey, we got together and doing this. And the Jamboard, if you click on it, what you're going to see is a big white open space. But over on the left, there is is Jamboard a new tool for people too, or have you been using it throughout the pandemic? New or new?
Jamboard,
New.
sticky notes.
So you click on the sticky note over on the left, you type in what strategy you might use, it'll get thrown up on the board, and then you'll have this, right? Because what's going to happen? We know it, we've done this a handful of times, you've been to conferences before. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff, and you're going to go back to your school, Jessica, and you're going to want to say, or your organization, and you're going to want to say, what was some of those strategies again? Well, you're going to want to reference this. So that's why we're doing this, where you can not just say it out and it's ephemeral and it's gone. We document it here so you can come back and you can look at these different strategies so that when you're in these meetings or you have these hallway conversations, you can run back to the Jamboard, reference it, and know what to say.
And I have to tell you, we do this every time we give this presentation, and every single time someone shares something or says something in a way that I'm like, wow, that was really good. And again, we have a collective experience, right? We're all here. We all work with individuals with complex communication needs. So we all have really amazing things to share. So the Jamboard is going to be awesome. Go ahead and break out into small groups. Oh, go ahead.
Question? Here come the mics. Who's going to get there first?
My experience is not that people don't agree that students need AAC, but people that are working with students think it's too difficult, that they don't know how to do it, that it's just quicker, and so it's not happening. So it's not about, like, I think people agree that AAC is needed, but they're overwhelmed by it.
Well, and let's be explicit here. When we talk about AAC, what this really means is that robust language system. So is that still consistent with your experience? If you're like, yeah, we want to give them a lot of language and words. Or has it been, no, we're still going to start with 4 pictures, and when they get to 4, they can move to 8, and 8 to 16. And what's been your experience?
Well, even when they're given a robust experience, then it's like, then the people are just like, I don't know how to do
It's too hard. Yeah. Okay, so that's a whole different problem, because they have adopted the mindset that we want to do it, but the barrier is the logistics around teaching it. And I think clearly what I heard from Jessica, but I think we heard from a bunch of other people, is there's still a mindset and I feel like Sean's saying that too, is that there's a mindset that, no, we have to start with PECs or something first. So we'll get to, now that we've adopted the mindset, and here's some strategies around the mindset, now how do we support this new mindset?
And yeah, we're going to talk a lot about that in coaching. We're going to, how do we actually get buy-in? How do we get people to actually do all the things that we know are useful for individuals learning AAC? It's the biggest struggle probably that you guys all face. That's the biggest struggle that I faced in my own practice. So yeah, we're going to reference that towards the end, towards the afternoon.
All right? Small groups.
Break. Talk.
I'm going to try it. Ready? Taco. 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 Sit right, and then that new strategy, right? That's the callback that you get kids in, right? Burger. Yeah, fries. No, Burger King.
I'm hungry.
So it's the hardest part of presenting is stopping good conversation, because we know you're having great insights here. But look at all the resources that are placed up here. One of the first sticky notes says, let's just give it a try. Kids surprise me every day. Exactly, right? They surprise us every day. I ask why they think the student doesn't need AAC. Let's lead with a question instead of coming in with, let me show you these research. And I printed out this website, the AAC agreements. Here, read this, inviting them to work through their thoughts, and you keep asking more provocative questions when they give that answer, can lead them down to a path of changing their mindset. Right? Cognitive dissonance is a really powerful drug.
I'm seeing a lot of let's just try. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the harm? Let's just try it. Let's try anyway and see how it goes. What's this? Reference evidence-based triangle. Point out opportunities where robust AAC would provide an increased access participation. Discuss overall goals for the individual and how access to AAC would help meet their, I'm going to guess, meet their needs.
Mm-hmm.
One that's not on there, but it sticks with me when we've done this before. Someone once wrote, how are we going to know what's inside their head? I think that's a great little question to ask, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like how are we going to, or another one was, how are we going to get to know them? You know, how are we going to know what they like? Like just simple questions like that can really be like, yeah, how are they going to?
Discuss how access to AAC can often decrease some behaviors that are seen or frustration. I think that's a really good one with families because no parent wants to see their child frustrated and struggling. And that can be, you know, the direct cause of, you know, behavior. Is like, imagine we were walking around all day and we had no ability to tell people what was going on with us. Like, I didn't sleep last night, my stomach hurts, I'm hungry, I don't actually want to be here, I don't want to do that thing, you know? So a lot of the individuals that we're working with experience high levels of frustration. And so having those conversations with communication partners, especially families, can be really powerful.
What if the whole classroom has access? How would that work differently or look differently? Could they learn from each other? Why does the work all have to be on the adults? We have an army of people, especially in the schools, but any organization is going to have lots of people. What if we implemented something that was a tier 1 support? Like tier 1 means available to everybody. Like I said, smiles are a tier 1 support. Everybody gets smiles, right? Laughing is a tier 1 support. Everyone gets to hear us laugh. What if AAC was implemented as a tier 1 support? Now people can be learning from each other. They're shoulder buddies.
I like this one, find out the reason for not wanting to try it. So that's a really good strategy whenever you're hitting a roadblock with someone. Ask more questions. Because if you can get to the bottom of, oh, it's a limiting belief, or, oh, they think the device is too high tech, or, oh, fill in the blank. They think that this device is going to prevent the child from learning how to speak. Getting to the bottom of the roadblock by asking questions then allows us to really get in there and do more training, figuring out exactly what the holdup is. And so Chris already kind of mentioned this, but asking more questions is a really powerful strategy to get more buy-in. It also tells someone, I care what you have to say, right? It's not just about me coming in as an expert or SLP or an AAC specialist. What do you think, right? Like turning the table on a communication partner and asking really specific questions, which again, we're going to talk about coaching in the afternoon. But that's my best strategy for trying to get people bought in. Asking a question like, if I could change one thing, you know, in your classroom or at home, what would that look like? What does that look like for you? It gives you insight into someone's motivations and their struggles. And if we can go into a classroom or a home and solve a problem for someone, they're way more likely to be like, this person can stick around. Like, this person is here to help me. And once we get that rapport, we get that buy-in, then we can start sharing, you know, what we think is, you know, best clinically and more ideas once we've built trust with someone.
Maddie, you're amazing. Maddie's pasting things from the Zoom chat into the Jamboard so that we have this, because the Zoom chat will go away, right? But the Jamboard will persist forever. It's never going to go away. You'll always have this. And some of the things from the chat. Bethany says, I integrate AAC in my program and have groups that are facilitated around AAC integration. All my students have access to a device, right? Sean, you need to find Bethany.
Link up.
Lisa Jones Park says, let's try it with a consistent approach and meet back. Let's just try it and then meet back up in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever the time frame is. We'll agree upon a time, and then we all have a need and a right to communicate. Yeah.
Love it.
Good. Was this helpful? Is this going to give you some strategies that you can use moving forward? You can reference back and try and change some people's mindsets?
Oh my gosh. So just for the people that are accessing this, this will be, they opened it up in their Google, so we saved in their Google. Or can you explain to them how they access this later?
Yeah. If you have the slide deck, the very first slide, that was bit.ly/mtaac22, that link, if you have the slide deck, and of course you can email us, or Maddie's going to put it in there eventually again once done copying and pasting, you'll have access to every hyperlink in that slide deck.
Yeah,
And
so
this,
right here.
So
See the
this
little-
Jamboard link that Rachel's showing, will
Yeah,
always
you'll just click on this, and then it'll open.
you don't have to have Google at all. It'll just, it's like putting it on a web page. Cool?
Cool. All right.
All right, so component number one, necessary component to successful AAC consideration, selection, implementation, all of it is thinking and believing that they will. That the client that you're working with, the student you're working with, the person, the individual will. Will what, Rachel?
Well, what? I don't know. What will they do?
A little misnomer or a little confusing thing is that it's called AAC, Augmentative, Alternative, or Alternative Augmentative Communication. Note the word augmentative. It's right there in the name that it doesn't, the myth of if you're speaking, you don't need it, because it's augmented. You could be speaking and need it, right? You augment it. But the word that throws people a little bit is that C for communication. Because if we were to take the situation of I want goldfish, and I were to put some lesson picks or board maker symbols down that said I want goldfish, and then I gave it to somebody and they pointed to I want goldfish, they have successfully used AAC. Right? They are, yeah, look, they're using AAC. They did it for their proficient in AAC. But what we're really talking about when it says believe they will is that they're going to learn language. And so we might even advocate for a name switch. Can't really switch it now. It's AAC. Everyone knows it AAC. But in your own mind, you might be thinking of it as AAL, Augmentative Alternative Language. And so what does that really mean is individual words and little parts of words. And we need to know what those little parts of words, when you add them to a word, how it might change the meaning. How words might combine together and mix together. When you put them in different orders, it changes the meaning. And that different combinations of words have different impact on people. Anything else?
That's
Anything
it.
else? That's what we're really talking about. That's what we're going after is language. Right? So when it comes to language, what is the end game? What's the goal? What's the picture we're trying to paint for that this is where we want to be? If you're in a school situation, when that person moves across the stage and leaves at age 22 or 23, Daryl, right? What do we want their language to look like? Or if you're working with adults and they're going to be with you for a certain time, where are we going? Before you leave, we want them doing what? What does that look like to you?
We need our mic runners.
Yes.
Raise your hand if you have.
I saw you
Molly's like,
mouthing
where do I
something.
run?
Yeah, you were
She told me to
saying
run.
When I think of end game for them, I just think of independence and successful communication with peers and colleagues and friends and family.
Okay, successful communication. Tell us more. What is successful communication?
Just being able to communicate their needs, wants, desires, having a conversation per se, or chat with people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, electronically or verbally.
Whatever means necessary, get their thoughts out of their head to somebody else. Okay?
Anyone else? Jessica?
Jessica?
Jessica down here.
Heather agrees with you, by the way. Heather says being able to communicate their ideas, their opinions.
I think that it being spontaneous, it's not something that's prompted. They're able to spontaneously speak or talk or communicate the way they want to.
Love that. Raise your hand really quickly if you're working with individuals who are completely prompt dependent in order to communicate. Yeah.
You know that person?
Yep.
Yeah. That's what we're trying to avoid. We all know that person.
We're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Others in the room? Well, oh, you got one? Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the end game should just be that they're able to communicate as much as we are, say what they want to say, when they want to say it. I mean, that's the goal.
Can you say that twice as loud? Okay, that's the second time I've asked you to do that.
I said the end game for any AAC user should be that they can communicate just as we do, when they want, how they want.
Yeah.
You just defined snug. Our next slide. Amazing. So what is snug? A lot of people were like, never heard of that. It stands for this beautiful acronym, Spontaneous Novel Utterance Generation. So exactly like you said, being able to have the same communication that you or I have. We can walk in anywhere and say whatever we want to whoever we want, whenever we want. And we should give that, that's a basic human right that we should really be striving for when we're working with individuals with complex communication needs.
Snug was originally created, the term was coined by someone named Katja Hill out of the University of Pittsburgh. Should we do the test?
Yes, we're going to do a test.
All right, we need
Get
a
ready.
volunteer.
Also, anyone who volunteers gets a free resource from my website. So
Or
there's
guess what? I have a surprise for you. I didn't tell you. I also have a free thing that I can
Stop
give away.
it.
Yes. So my daughter and I worked on a course for ISTE. So the publisher for the books is ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education. And they asked me to write a course for their ISTE-U. And so it's an online course all about accessible educational materials. And so I wrote the course, and my daughter did the illustrations for the course. It's all got memes, just like if you're liking the memes in this presentation, then you would love this course. So you have a choice of going to Rachel's store and getting something from Rachel's store, or you could write me, and I could give you a course code.
yeah, I love it.
Volunteer.
Jessica.
Jessica wants to volunteer. She just beat you to it. But
There'll be plenty of
other
opportunities. Trust me.
All right. No, Jessica, you're it.
You're it. Tag, you're it.
Okay, so Jessica, do you and I know each other?
No,
No, we haven't met before.
no.
No. Y'all, do you believe her? Yeah. Okay.
She seems trustworthy.
Jessica, I don't have your text message, right? We're not exchanging phone messages at
No.
all? Right, okay. So Jessica, I'm going to ask you to just say a sentence off the top of your head.
The sky is blue.
The sky is blue, okay? Great sentence, is all fair. It's a sentence, got a subject, predicate, verb, right? So the sky is blue. Let's put this through the SNUG test. You had mentioned earlier, spontaneous. Was it spontaneous? Would everyone agree that it's spontaneous, right? Because Jessica, we didn't know each other. You didn't know I was gonna be like, hey, when you're the one who's gonna volunteer, and then you say the sky is blue, right? We didn't do that, right? Does everyone believe that? Right? Okay, true. Okay, so that was spontaneous. Jessica, as far as you know, are we living in a virtual reality simulation? Elon Musk might tell you we are, but right?
No, I don't think we are.
Right? And even if we are, you're you, right? There's no one what's your name? Crystal didn't whisper to you what to say,
No.
right? So you're you. So it came from you,
Yes.
that sentence, right? So it was spontaneous. Jessica uttered it, right? Jessica generated it. Now here's the question. This is where people get tripped up a lot of times. Is this word novel? Is this word novel? Spontaneous, novel. The sky is blue. Have we ever heard that sentence before? Yes. So that particular sentence, Jessica, doesn't really pass the SNUG test. But that's okay. I wasn't asking you to pass the SNUG test. I just said say a sentence. But now, either Jessica or anyone else, how can we change it, or what could we say to make it novel?
I saw a blue sky 2 days ago.
I saw a blue sky 2 days ago.
Make it crazy.
And
Crazier.
And I don't know,
but maybe we'll have blue skies forever.
there you go, okay. That sentence, it's very like, you all knew what those words were, you all knew what they meant. Jessica put them in an order that made sense to you. You could picture it in your mind as she's saying those words, right, Jessica? But it's very likely that those words have never been put in that order before, ever, in the history of the planet. Right here in Missoula, we made history. And it's a very good chance that no one will ever put those words in that order again in the history of the planet. I mean, maybe, who knows, right? But the point is, that is completely novel. And if Jessica has that ability, then why wouldn't we think that we could teach that ability to anybody, right? What's the least dangerous assumption is that we could teach that ability to anybody. Thank you, Jessica. Right?
Amazing. Round of applause for Jessica, being brave to volunteer. So on this slide, it says, be careful of scripts and quick-fire phrases. So how many of you guys are working with individuals that have a lot of pre-programmed phrases or picture exchange that has the whole sentence strip? Raise your hand if you're dealing with some pre-programming. Not to say that there's never a time and a place for something like that, right? Like saying, I need to go to the bathroom. We don't need to wait as a AAC user generates that long sentence, right? We need it to be fast. Oftentimes I'm thinking about this through a social lens, something that needs to be communicated quickly in a social context. Great, let's pre-program a button. But the problem lies when we're just kind of generating sentences for our individuals that we're working with, and we're not teaching them what's called generative language, being able to put those words together and formulate on their own. So I say this because there's a time and a place, like I said, but we don't want to get stuck there. Because if we truly want snug, then we need to teach the generative language, need to teach how to combine words, and when we make combinations, and when we change the order, it changes the meaning. So just something to take note of there. I have a pop quiz question. What's a feature or something that someone absolutely needs to know how to do in order to truly achieve snug? What's something that someone absolutely needs to have? Without it, they couldn't possibly communicate anything they want to say to anyone. Imagination, that's a good guess. Vocabulary. You nailed it. Someone said a keyboard and spelling.
Spelling and a keyboard,
Yes.
exactly.
We can only program so many words and phrases into an AAC system. We can't possibly know every single word that an individual will want to say. So we absolutely need to have systems that are robust, that have keyboards, right? Another big challenge with PECs. There's not a keyboard with picture exchange systems, right? We also need to teach literacy, which we have some slides. We're not going to be able to go into as much detail as we want today, but literacy and a keyboard are absolutely essential. Really quick, can I share a story, Chris?
Yeah.
Working with an autistic student, he's been on my caseload for a long time now, like 6 years. When I first started working with him, he is obsessed with pipe cleaners. He would make these really amazing pipe cleaner people and pipe cleaner houses, and he had really unique names for all these people. I'd hold up a pipe cleaner person and say, who's this? And he'd say like Biff, Sige, all these nonsensical names. If he didn't have access to a keyboard, he would have never been able to communicate, this is actually what I want my pipe cleaner person to be named. Which sounds like a silly example, but it's just, how many times have we run into a situation where we're like, oh, that word's not on here, right? It happens all the time to us. So we just need to be cognizant of choosing robust language systems, teaching literacy skills. Really, we can't achieve snug without those two things.
Two other comments. One comment is about the adults. So if you're working with adults, you might be thinking, yeah, but the people I work with are like 70 years old. Again, if you're thinking like end of life, this would be one of the things like, I don't know necessarily, it's never too late, but if you're thinking of end of life, then maybe we're not thinking about generating novel utterances. It's really about getting your day-to-day needs met and communicating what Gail Van Tatenhove told us is recording some of your memories and thoughts for other people to learn from. That's something that seems to be really important for end of life. The other thing I want to talk about when we mentioned something you absolutely need to work on is a keyboard and the idea of spelling. I might add, and literacy, I might add the caveat that it's spelling, but not in the way that we think of it, like we might have think of spelling back in the 80s. What we have now today is something called word prediction. So it has to be, and you all use word prediction when you're on your text and your phone, your email, all has word prediction. Now, when you do a Google search, it does word prediction. That technology is just getting better, and it's getting more, and it gets to be just certain kids used to get it, and certain people used to use it, and now we all use it. So the skill changes a little bit. It's not, I have to be able to spell well enough to recognize the word when it shows up, right? Not necessarily spell the entire word, which makes the technology can help us there, right?
I just wanted to add one more thing. I started working with a young man who is now 21. He came to me at 19, had no real access to verbal communication, no access to AAC. I'm like, what has been happening for the last 18 years? But Dad was like, I really think that like these iPads could be helpful for him. So of course I set him up with an AAC system. Fast forward, I've been working with him for 2.5 years. He is becoming literate. He is putting words together into sentences. So, I share this to say it's never too late to, start working on literacies, to start giving access to communication and teaching language skills. I had to convince, I was like, okay, we're gonna also work on literacy. And Dad was like, no, I don't think so. And I'm like, yeah, trust me, this is gonna be great. He also has an affinity for letters. He's autistic and loves letters. And I'm like, it's his jam. Why would we not teach him what to do with these letters and how we can combine these letters to make new words? So anyway, just hopefully for those of you who are working with young adults, it isn't too late to get started. Chris mentioned end-of-life stuff. Our goal is always to really look at the individual in front of us and figure out, what do they need? How can I make their life easier? How can I help them connect with those around them? So it does look different, but it's not too late.
Big takeaways, least dangerous assumption. So we do not want to be the limiting factor, right? And spontaneous novel utterance generation, be able to say whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, to whoever you want to say it. You have that autonomy to do that. That's what we're working towards.
All right, just a fun little activity. Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just wondering if there is, we work with adults, and not all of those adults have had any sort of formal education or a variety of different things in their lives. So they may not have had any experience with these. Are there tools or certain types of assessment things that you can look at to see what a beginning start might be for them to kind of help guide this?
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask a follow-up question. When you say start, do you mean with communication in general or with literacy?
Both. You're saying both.
Both? Maybe? It's okay if it's both.
No, I'm just getting information from all around. So. I think for my question was about which programs are best to use, which tools are best to use. We've tried things about recognizing pictures and things like that just to see where they're at, but not really anything formal as far as an assessment of what they know and what they don't, or how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about the selection process in general terms coming up. So that's what I'm hearing you talk about is how do we select something? And sometimes someone might have some experience, and sometimes when I say someone, the client might have experience, and other times they don't. What does that selection process look like? We're gonna talk a little bit about it.
One thing I'll add to that, though, whenever I have any individual in front of me, what I'm trying to figure out is where are their breakdowns in their day, where communication and language would be super helpful right now. They're using a lot of nonverbal communication, or they're getting upset, or there's lots of kind of indicators of, in this situation, it would make this person's life a lot easier if they could share, if they could connect. Whether you're working with young kids or adults, thinking through that lens and talking with families about their goals. There's a ton of tools out there. There's a ton of different things you could try. There's a ton of different approaches. But if you get really clear about what your goal is for that individual, And that might mean talking to that individual about what their goals are for themselves, depending on, a variety of things. But really getting clear, and then the tool comes in, right? And then we figure out how we're using that tool because we found something that's intrinsically motivating for that individual or that family, and we just start there. It feels very overwhelming if you're thinking about AAC, like, and now we're going to teach thousands of words in this device. There's so many words and potential. And I think that's why it becomes overwhelming and daunting to people, because it feels like, where do I start? Like, how do I begin? Start with, the individual in front of you, and what one thing would change, if it changed, would make a huge impact in that person's life. That's typically the way I walk into any type of assessment when I'm meeting a new family and meeting a new individual or child. I'm like, what's one thing I can change that's gonna, impact that person's life? And then when you change that one thing, all of a sudden it's like, well, let's change more things, right? Like, we can change another thing and another thing. And that's kind of how we build these skills over time, especially when it's like, whoa, it feels like a lot when I'm thinking about all the things. Focus in on one thing that's gonna make a big impact.
Something else I just want to comment and then is I want to reiterate the least dangerous assumption, because something we hear a lot in any population is, oh, I never would have thought they could have done that. So like, you might be thinking, well, they didn't have a real formal education. They probably can't spell, or they're not literate, and so I don't really have to be thinking keyboard. What am I going to do, teach them at 60 years old how to read? Maybe they have. How do we know that our assumption is true? Maybe they, and that's the big surprise, the aha all the time that we hear is like, oh my gosh, I never would have thought. Well, what if we just thought? So I would make sure we're checking our assumptions when we're thinking about the selection process.
I feel like this is a good pause for our little break. Yeah?
Yes, past 10:15. Did you have a final?
One more question? Any other questions?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking of you teaching an adult with autism how to read, and
Yes.
obviously being able to type words opens up a whole world of communication. But I mean, how does that look different? Like, if Hooked on Phonics didn't work in grade school, are you teaching sight words that have meaning to the person? Or is there a program that you recommend? Because we're in the group home stage now. So we have staff who are very busy, often short-staffed, and they would need very concrete, guidance.
Yeah, and I think that, again, if we're focusing on what does this individual, or perhaps this group of individuals that have similar needs, like, what's going to be highly functional and relevant for them. So maybe it's not, starting from the ground up with letter recognition and sound to letter correspondence and all these things that we know are the building blocks, but maybe it's like, okay, what are the 5 top places that these people go? Being able to recognize that as a sight word. Autistic individuals have a really unique ability to memorize a lot of words as sight words. And so I feel like maybe starting somewhere like there. Again, thinking about kind of reverse engineering from what language or what words or vocabulary would be really helpful. Like, oh, when they see the word bathroom or restroom, right? Like, that feels super functional and really relevant to be able to read that word and to do some explicit teaching around, this is restroom, this is what it looks like, here's some pictures of it, let's go visit it, right? Something like that, does that make sense of how I kind of frame that and think through it clinically?
It does. I'm just wondering how it works in, the race of everyday life. Like, if you have Applebee's, you have a picture of Applebee's, and you want to give him a choice, and you want to know if he can, learn to read Applebee's instead, and then ultimately type it. Is the actual use of the word done in a table time kind of setting, and then you would change the device to show the word instead of the restaurant?
Well, I think when you're thinking about communication, you could, simply have that on a high-tech speech generating device, and you wouldn't change what that looks like. It would be the picture and it would be the label. When you're thinking about teaching that as a sight word, so being able to recognize Applebee's. Applebee's is a unique example because I feel like these types of places, they have branding around them, right? So Applebee's has like the red letters and the cursive, so that feels really relevant. But just doing a simple matching exercise. So it's like we have the text, we have the picture, and we're trying to figure out where's Applebee's and what says Applebee's, as an example. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, take a break? A little break, guys?
Yeah.
Potty break?
The break is 15 minutes long, so we're at 10:20, so 35. Did I do my math right? Yeah, let's get started. We're ready. We're back. We're back. We need a quick volunteer from somebody in the room. You don't have to get up or do anything. Just need, okay, we have a job for you. Ready? Here's the job. That is Rachel's glass of water. This is my glass of water. If you see me going for that glass of water, just yell out in the middle of it, like, Chris, that's Rachel's glass of water. Okay, I'm gonna try and keep it separate, but cool, can you got it? Will you help us out with that? Look at the glasses going on nice. I don't know. No, it's just paused, I think. Could it be a little bit? Yeah, see, there you go. Okay, so I don't think we're going to do this activity, Rachel, with how many people. We'll just ask the question. We don't have to go to the mentee. Let's just ask the room real quick to yell out the number. How many people do you know who use AAC and have achieved SNUG? They can say whatever they want to say.
0. Whoa.
1, 0. Chat, put it in the chat. What's your?
So it sounds like a small number.
Yeah, exactly. We have a lot of work to do. I'm gonna go off script for a second.
This feels dangerous.
It's
feels
so dangerous. Today, Rachel and I were walking in, and we stopped here at the university, and we sat, and we were just enjoying our coffee for a second and chatting about the presentation. And I took a picture of a quote that was there. And here's what the quote said. It said. This is right here from the university. It says, "Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Margaret Mead. I saw that quote and it was like, this is us. This is what we're doing here, right? Is that someday in another presentation, we're going to ask the same question and the answers are going to be 5, 10, 15, 20. Today it's 0 and 1 and 2 and 3. But we're at the start of this movement and you're part of it, right? So we're going to do this together. We're going to change this so that people who use AAC, it's not these low numbers. It's everybody.
The other thing I'll add is, I like to just sometimes take a step back and reflect on the work that we do. Because I think that sometimes we're like all up in it, like we got goals and we got all these things that we're doing, right? Take a step back for just a second. Everyone in this room, has interacted with someone with complex communication needs. Oftentimes, you guys have been introducing AAC systems, using AAC systems, learning how to use them better. That's why you're all here today. Think about the impact that has on an individual. So many people come to my practice and, families have been through multiple speech therapists and no one's been able to help, or my child's too severe. I've heard all of these things, right? And the ability to give access to communication to someone who otherwise wouldn't have it, it's such a powerful gift. And so I just want to, we'll all give ourselves a pat on the back. The work you do matters and is really, really important. And I think, again, we're so caught up in the minutia, right, sometimes, that we forget, like, oh my gosh, like, think about the gift that I give. And sometimes when I'm struggling with buy-in and all these things and I feel like I'm at a roadblock, I take a step back and I'm like, the work you do matters, Rachel. We can't always get the outcome we want, right? But we're working towards that outcome every single day. And so just give yourselves a pat on the back for all the amazing work that you do, because it really does make a huge impact in the lives of so many individuals. Okay.
All right.
So
Good.
the results, this is not fine. Yeah. We don't know a lot of people who have achieved SNUG.
But we will.
Yes. And if you don't, go ahead and listen to our AAC user episodes. Chris Klein, I feel like he needs a special shout out. We're going to actually, you have a picture of Chris Klein in this slide deck, right?
Yeah.
Chris Klein is an amazing AAC user. He does a lot of speaking events, actually. You can hire Chris to come to your organization or Zoom in virtually and talk with your group and show this is what SNUG with an AAC user looks like. I'm super excited to share the picture because Chris actually has a really unique access method to his device. So I'll tease it there. Okay.
So component 1 is believe they will. Component 2, believe they'll do what? Expect. We're going to expect and work towards SNUG, spontaneous novel utterance generation.
All right.
For the most part. Again, some adults we might change that, but for the kids from the school perspective, for sure, SNUG. Right? All right. We already got the answer to this question, which says, how much do you know about core vocabulary? It sounds like we need to spend a little time on it. So let's talk about core vocabulary, shall we? Core vocabulary, you can put all the words and all the vocabulary into two giant camps. One camp is core vocabulary, and the other camp is fringe vocabulary. Core vocabulary is essentially, if you were to take any conversation, just left and had break and had a conversation, any conversation anywhere in the world from age 2 to 102, and you were to record that conversation, and then go back and write out all the words, what you'd find is that the vast majority of the words, approximately 75 to 80% of those words, are made up of the same set of 300 to 400 words. Let's call it 350 words. Right? So if we could teach these 350 words, we get people 80% of the way there towards snug. Is that 100%? No. But this is why we focus our instruction around these set of 350 to 400 words. Right? Now, fringe vocabulary would be the opposite of that, and these would be all the other words. If we've got this core set of 350, what about all the other words?
Go ahead, you have a question?
Just a question. Do you mean words that are spoken? Like verbal vocabulary, not written?
No, we mean words.
Just
yes,
words.
All words. If you were to take the corpus being a large set of written words, you'd find a similar percentage.
I like to share kind of a metaphor when we're thinking about core vocabulary versus fringe. So let's give an example. We're going to the zoo. If I'm thinking through fringe vocabulary, which is mostly nouns, right? I'm thinking about words like elephant and cotton candy and all these specific things, right? And this is where we tend to get stuck, right, with our complex communicators. We're like, oh, there's a unit on dinosaurs. We need to program all the different dinosaurs into this system. If we're at the zoo, yes, we can absolutely put all the animals that we're going to see and we can program all those things. But if we're thinking through core language, we're thinking about words like go and see and eat and more and different and like, right? All of this more abstract language, core language. We can use those words at the zoo, at home, at school, all these different places to use those words so they have more linguistic power. And again, we need to balance these two, and you could see fringe versus core versus fringe as far as the amount of words and the usage frequency. But we really need to be strategic about the words that we're choosing to target. And if I'm going to target elephant, but we're only going to use it once at the zoo, and this individual isn't really fond of elephants, then we're just kind of thinking about words that aren't going to have a lot of linguistic power for the individuals. And that's kind of the importance of core vocabulary.
All right, so we're going to take the next 40 minutes, okay, it's a long activity, to answer this question. Using just these words, how many sentences can you make? And the words are banana, bread, cereal, cheese, chocolate milk, cracker, french fries, hamburger, hot dog, ice cream, jelly, juice, ketchup, macaroni, pancake, peanut butter, potato chips, raisins, scissors, and cup. All right, 40 minutes, break up into small groups. Zoom, we expect you to do it as well. It's a joke, right? We're not actually going to ask you to do 40 minutes of this because how many sentences can you make if your AAC just has these words on them? 0. Maybe 1. Hot dog, right? Could maybe be a sentence, but that's about it. So now this is a different activity. This activity is the home screen of a particular app called LAMP Words for Life. Now, LAMP Words for Life has, what you're looking at here is 84 cells. Not all of them are words. We just picked this one. We could have picked touch chat. We could have picked prolo quo. We just picked this one as the example. So it's a grid of 84 cells, approximately 78 to 80 words up there. And now we are going to ask you to see, just using just these words, how many sentences can you make? We'll give you a few minutes to come up with your responses, and then we're going to ask you to count them. And then the winner, who has come up with the most, the team that has the most, we have fabulous prizes.
Prizes.
Okay? So you can also Google LAMP Words for Life. If you have an iPad, you might be able to have that as well. So go. All right, pencils down.
And stop.
Time's up. Take a moment. Chat, you're doing this as well, I hope. Count them up. How many sentences did you come up with?
Nice work.
Okay. Y'all have your number? Or we're going to raise your hand. Everyone raise a hand. All right, when you have your number, raise your hand.
We have shy people who don't want to raise their hand. Maybe they're still counting.
Chat, you should raise your hand too. We're just going to trust that you're doing that. You don't have to raise your hand. I'm just kidding.
We're watching you.
So Sarah put in 36. Okay, so if Sarah's got, so far, Sarah has 36. Sarah has the high number. So put your hand. What happened to your hands? What? So if you can beat 36, keep your hand raised. But if you can't beat 36, put your hand down.
Ooh.
Yeah, some hands up. Hands up.
Excellent.
Anyone in chat beat 36? Okay. All right. I'm going to go for how about 40? 45? 50? Back there. Okay, chat, last chance. Anyone in chat? I keep looking at here like, chat, anyone beat 50?
How many did you actually have? 50?
Okay, 83. Let's hear some of your sentences.
Using the question word, what, is, and all other 83 cells except for, yeah.
Nice.
She
You
hacked
gamed
the
it.
system.
Oh, yes. What
I love
is
a good
finished?
hack.
What is mine? What is little? What is up?
Amazing. I just have a lot of questions.
Oh, my gosh. She needs a prize.
She does. You get a prize.
Yes. Okay. So let's roll it back to, I think you guys were second place, right? We have prizes for second place, too. Molly's going to give you some second place prizes. And what were some of your sentences?
Like, I need to drink.
I need to drink.
You are there.
You are there.
Turn it off.
Turn it off.
I sit there.
I sit there.
I hear that.
I hear that. I
Please
hear that.
eat.
What was that last one? Sorry.
Please eat.
Please eat.
Please go fast.
Do you see the point of this is that there are so many different ways you can combine this small set of 80-ish words into different combinations that you could get somebody really 80% of the way there, right? That's even a smaller set. It's only 80 words. Core vocabulary, like I said, is maybe 350 words, right? So good stuff. If you ever find yourself doing this activity again, another hack over there is the word not. So just throw a not in most of those sentences that you said, and you can now just double your count, right? And then this is a great activity, by the way, to take back to your neck of the woods to get people invested in core vocabulary. Like, has anyone done this activity before, or is this new? New, a little, some version of it, right? Huh? What's that? Oh, you did it in one of our sessions. Yes.
Can I just ask, so
Or I'll say we would take this back and use this, but I find it messy. Is there a system to how it's set up so
Okay.
you can find things? 'Cause
Yes, but I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version because that's a whole thing, okay? Definitely find us, and if you want the full version, we'll tell you the big story.
I was going to say, I have a really helpful resource with LAMP in particular. I don't even think I've ever shared this with you. Someone posted a video explanation on YouTube about the way it's organized and the way they teach it, which I think is fantastic. So also, the way you describe it is also fantastic.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here's what you need to know. Here's what everyone needs to know about this particular system, is that this system was one of the first systems. It's the sibling of the Unity system, MinSpeak, Unity, Prinky-Romic Company systems. But it's the first one of that brand, the only one of that brand that came out on an iPad, okay? So, well, I guess TouchChat is now on an iPad too, but it's not the same, right? Okay, anyway. Back in the 80s, they developed this system, and then this is just the most recent version. And what you really need to know about this system is they didn't just puke up a bunch of words. Have you ever played Sudoku? Yeah, right? Ever got to Sudoku and get stuck? And then when you're stuck, do you ever think, oh, those idiots, they must have printed it wrong? No, you never think that, right? You think there's something about the puzzle that I'm not getting, right? Same deal, right? They didn't just puke up a bunch of words. There's a rhythm and a rhyme to it, but it's a pattern that someone needs to show you. And once it's like giving you the pill in the Matrix, for those of you that know that reference, right? Once someone gives you the pill in the Matrix, and you're like, now I can see the Matrix. Same thing. Once you watch the YouTube video or someone explains it to you, you're like, oh, this is why it's organized this way. So yes. The second thing I want to comment that, it's so great the way you phrased it. It's so messy, right? We often hear this a lot. That's so visually overwhelming. Not to kids. Not to, most of the time, it's the adults that looks like, that's too complicated for our kids. They don't, or for our adults, they have cognitive impairments. Again, that violates the least dangerous assumption. Let's give it to them and have them prove to us that they can't use it, rather than assume that that's too visually complex. Oh, our caption,
Oh,
thank
thank
you.
you.
That's-
Hit it. Let's see. Love it. We love stories. That's how we learn, right?
So obviously, I'm the one that helps match people to devices. But I had a kiddo come in, and he was just one of those obvious LAMP kids. And so I pulled out LAMP, and he was 4. He couldn't spell. He watched us use the find feature. And he started opening the find feature and having his mom spell words. I can't remember how he got there, but he was in the first 5 minutes of being there finding specific dinosaurs that we had on our shelf, and he found their specific names. He figured out which 3 buttons to hit to get to Stegosaurus. And so sometimes it is just the perfect fit. And so it might look messy, but you never know where that person is going to go with it. And this kid was searching words on his own, a non-speller that obviously is going to be a speller early.
Amazing.
I'll say one last thing about LAMP and just this particular app is that another great analogy is a QWERTY keyboard, right? You look at a QWERTY keyboard, look at a keyboard on your phone or on a computer, you're like, well, that's stupid. Why is the QWERT there? What? That's so messy. Why isn't it ABCD, right? We never questioned it. We just learned where it was, right? And there was some reason behind why it is the way it is. It doesn't matter. Just know that there is a pattern to it, right? There's a reason to it. Yes?
I have another pattern. I think it's a good example that you can share with your.
Here comes the mic.
Mike, run.
I don't run.
Just kidding. No pressure.
I think that this goes back to how do we get folks on board with AAC. And so I organize my iPhone, not by the apps on my iPhone, not by what they do, like banking, social media. I organize them by color. And so I've made this analogy before at work where basically I motor plan my phone. Like when I go into my phone and I make a change, then it affects my selection. And I've talked to this with colleagues. It's like we motor plan all the time. And so it's just something that is, we can share. You actually use LAMP, but you don't even know that you use LAMP.
Exactly. It's total foreshadowing for what's coming up.
Can't wait.
Okay, so core vocabulary, small set of words can make a big impact. We focus our instruction around core vocabulary. We focus our work with adults around core vocabulary. Let's start with teaching these words and what they mean. It can be a small set. It doesn't have to be these 80 words, it can be others. Core vocabulary, another way to think about it is parts of speech. So what are core vocabulary? What are the parts of speech? I'm going to take you back. Remember, you heard these stories before. Your 6th grade mean English teacher that taught you those words. Do you have a question?
No, I was going to say verbs.
Verbs. Like what? What are some verbs? Yell them out. Go.
See,
Run, stop, go. Yes. Eat, drink, feed. Yes. Okay, what else? Pronouns like?
I, we, you.
It. All right, what else? Let's put nouns on the shelf for a second.
On the fringe shelf.
Adjectives like? Big. Sticky, little, shiny. Colors will fall into the adjective category, and also this and that, right? What's the difference between this and that? Why do we use those two differently? Yes, one's distal, one's proximal. Essentially is, this is my water because it's close to me, and that is Rachel's water because it's far away, rather than saying this is Rachel's water. It kind of doesn't make sense, right? If one's farther. Okay, but adjectives, that was a side note. Adjectives. Okay, what else? Chat, come on, help us out. What's that? Prepositions like in, on, over. Excellent. Anything we missed? Conjunctions. Huh? And, and, or, but. I'm going to sing it. You know what I'm going to sing? Conjunction, junction, what's your function? If you don't know that reference, Schoolhouse Rock. Schoolhouse Rock. Yes, chat, yes, yes. Okay, so what it's not, for the most part, now's the time to pull it off the shelf, are nouns, right? For instance, I could say the word armadillo, right? We might know what an armadillo is. How often do we use the word armadillo? Person, place, thing ideas are typically not. Not always. Again, it's a rule of thumb, mom, pretty frequent word, that's a noun, right? It's, again, rule of thumb. And the way because we said we need to spend a little more time on it, I'm going to use is it okay?
It's totally okay.
Okay. I like to think of the core vocabulary. I like to think of nouns as the Mr. Yuck of this whole thing. Okay. So this is really going to date me in my references. Everyone know who Mr. Yuck is? Mr. Yuck, anyone? Yeah, okay, can you tell us who Mr. Yuck is? We need a microphone back there. Chat, anyone know who Mr. Yuck is? If not, if you don't know, this is where you pull out your phone and you Google it, Mr. Yuck.
He's a sticker. It's green. He's got a frowny face. I think his tongue sticks out. It's for the poison control, and we stuck it everywhere so we wouldn't drink the Drano.
Exactly, right. Before kids were out eating Tide Pods, we were drinking bleach. And so Poison Control came out with an initiative where they gave everybody these green stickers, and they called them Mr. Yuck. So because Clorox bottles look a lot like milk jugs and would go under the sink. So I think this is a great analogy for nouns and for when we focus our instruction. Nobody said when we were drinking bleach, we got to throw out the bleach. We can't use bleach anymore. No bleach ever. No, we said, let's teach it. This is when we use the bleach. There's a sticker on it. We use it selectively. There are times when we use it. We don't drink it. We use it in this way. And we taught what the bleach was for. We didn't throw it out. And that's the same analogy here with nouns, is that why I say the nouns are the Mr. Yuck of this whole thing. Let's put a big sticker on it and say we teach nouns selectively. We just don't focus our time there. We're not throwing them out. We're going to still work on them. And again, foreshadowing, we're going to talk a little bit about when do we use the nouns and which nouns. There's a million words in the English language. So do we focus on armadillo or do we focus on a different set like mom and dad?
So the way, oh, yeah.
Question, yes.
Actually, it's more of a comment. Fun fact, when you have an aphasia, you don't remember nouns. So apparently the brain doesn't think nouns are all that important after you've had a stroke.
Love that.
Excellent.
The neuroscience, great. So the way Chris and I like to think about it is the same way that core and fringe is represented, right? 80% of what you or I say is core vocabulary. When we're thinking about instruction around vocabulary for complex communicators, striking this balance. It's not throwing away all the Mr. Yuck, right? All the bleach. It's using nouns specifically. Sometimes that's a really good place to start because it's super concrete. It's highly motivating for some individuals, those specific things that they want to talk about. But we have to make sure that we're really balancing with core vocabulary. Just because we know how powerful those words are. We want to choose words that have more linguistic power that can be used all throughout an individual's day, not just specific words. Also, we can't build sentences with only nouns. Like, how do we build? How do we go, from single words to 2-word phrases to 3-word phrases? We need core vocabulary. That is the glue that puts sentences together.
Hot dog.
All right.
Okay, now this is.
Chris is so excited, you guys.
Here's a meme. A woman and a man sleeping in a bed together. The man's turned away from her, and the woman is thinking, I bet he's thinking about how to teach core vocabulary, and he's thinking, how does an AAC user learn ing, plural s, possessive s, and ed, past tense ed? Right? So the big question is, how did you learn ing? Right? How does a baby learn ing? When you were this little baby here on the screen, the baby somewhere learns ing. How did that happen? How did that happen for you? Modeling. Tell us more. What does that mean, modeling?
Seeing it being done over and over and over again.
Experiencing it being done over and over. So parents said to the baby, oh, look, the little baby's pooping, Rachel. Look, pooping, pooping. Oh, look. And it's not just talking to the baby, but talking to each other around the baby. And eventually, one day, that baby starts to grow and grow and grow and learn language and eventually says ing. That's how it worked for you. They start saying pooping and adding the ing to the poop, right?
Yeah.
Who knew that would be the example I played?
I know. What's funny is I just noticed for the first time tooting on here. And I was like, that's a good one. That's a good verb.
Okay, so a bunch of speech therapists in the room. Don't freak out, but we're going to talk about something called Brown's grammatical morphemes.
Don't get triggered. Don't get triggered.
So Brown's grammatical morphemes. Morphemes are the smallest unit of meaning to a word, right? And that is like an ing. That's an s, like making it plural, or adding a possessive to it, or making it past tense. And this person named Brown did some research about what are the ages that these things become mastered in typically developing language. And the very first one that is mastered is ing, which is why we use this in the slide deck, ing, progressive possessive ing, like mommy driving, right? And what it says up there is that happens, is mastered between 19 and 28 months of age, right? So somewhere right around your second birthday is when you might master using ing. Fair? Okay. So from here, we want to do an activity.
Yeah.
And this activity
is a fun one.
is, we are really going to, we would have changed this activity, but we knew we had our chat here with us, right? Now, those of you with devices, you can also do this activity. So pull out a device or chat and do this activity. There is a hyperlink that is bit.ly 7up Jamboard, okay? And what that lists on that 7up Jamboard is, and Rachel, if you want to take us there.
Everyone's taking photos right now, so I'm going to pause.
So, all right.
I'm going to get the camera ready.
But chat, that Jamboard should be set. I know that this Jamboard is set right. You don't have to worry about that. What it's going to list is 8 of the grammatical morphemes, specifically ing. The next one is in. The next one is on. The next one is s. Then irregular past tense, like went is an example of irregular past tense for go. And then, come on, it's loading.
Come on, little guy.
Do you know how to make it load faster? Tap your foot. If you tap your foot, see?
Wow, what a hack.
To be articles, a, and the, and then, of course, ed is regular past tense. So what we'd let, yes, it should all work. This particular one, because this is it working for you? That might be an issue. Jamboard does have that issue sometimes. But the idea here is to drag green check marks on top of the ones that you have explicitly taught, either to adults, to kids, where you've explicitly done lessons around these particular morphemes. Put a green check if you've taught it, put a red X if you have not, okay? And then we'll discuss. So if you've explicitly taught ing, put a green check. If you've explicitly taught on, put a green check. In, green check. Plural S, green check. Irregular past tense, put a green check. Possessive S, put a green check. To be, put a green check. Articles, a, an, and the, put a green check. Or ed, put a green check. If you have not taught them explicitly, put a red X.
It's fun to watch these all come in. Oh, someone's drawing. we got some scribbles going on.
All right, what we're seeing, let me describe it real quick, is a lot of red X's on the articles. Is that fair?
Yes.
A lot of, maybe mix of on the ED, half red X's, half green checks. We're still, again, we have a lot of people, so there's some people that can't participate in it yet because of the Google limitations, but it's okay. We see a lot of green checks on and in and ing and plural S. A lot of green checks on possessive S.
Mm-hmm.
Articles are really
Those poor little articles.
getting
No
slammed.
one's paying attention to them.
All right. What do we notice with what we just described there? Do you see any patterns emerge? Can you? Well, clearly articles are being left out in some regard, right? Not as many people are teaching the articles. How about ED? ED looks like a hot mess. There's a lot of red X's on there and more red X's than green check marks. So we're not teaching ED as much as we are teaching, let's say, on and in. On has one red X, in has one red X. The rest are green marks. ING, a little surprised about ING, to be honest. Usually there's more red X's on ING. Right now
And
there's
possessive S.
Yeah, possessive S.
Interesting.
Has no red X's.
I know.
It's weird.
You guys are all targeting possessive S.
A lot of people talking about ownership here in Montana.
It's mine.
The point of this activity is to really realize that we have a prevalence to teach whole words. So on, in, the articles are botched, but that doesn't hold true. But on and in seem to have a lot of green check marks, right? But the other grammatical morphemes, not so much. ING being the exception in this particular audience, right? Is that fair, chat? Okay, so one of the reasons that might be, we've done this exercise many times. It would be great to really count them up one day, but we find this to be the consistent practice, is that because people have heard of core vocabulary with more prevalence, they may have been to a training about core vocabulary. A lot of the words on communication devices are core vocabulary, that we focus our instruction around core vocabulary. You heard us say that. But we leave out the morphemes. And so when we don't focus our instruction around the morphemes. But Brown's grammatical morphemes tell us that ing comes before in and on. And plural S comes around the same time as on. There's the same, they come between 27 and 33 months. Possessive S and irregular past tense verbs are 25 to 46 months and 26 to 40 months. And we're not, well, I guess here in Montana you're focusing on possessive S, but the rest of the country's not. And so we hope a big takeaway for you is that if we're changing our mindset from AAC to AAL, and we're focusing on language, we can't leave out these morphemes, right? If we really are thinking that someday someone's going to say whatever they want to say, however they want to say it, then we need to teach those morphemes explicitly. And so we want to add core words and morphemes together, making the word corphemes, exactly, right?
You heard it here first.
What all it means is that when you're doing instruction, you take not just go and stop, right? But you focus on going, stopping, went and stopped, goes and stops. And we add those morphemes around those words. Does that make sense?
I also want to add, I think that sometimes we, start seeing success. We're targeting go, for example, and then we naturally, hey,
sorry, I didn't mean
I'm
to
watching you. I'm talking, but I'm watching you. And then we think, where do we go next? And we oftentimes jump to, well, let's build a sentence, right? Let's hop into a two-word phrase. Instead of thinking, we're doing so great with go, why don't we target went or going, right? We're building off of a strength that an individual is already showing us. I think it's sometimes we think, well, we're not going to worry about grammar yet, right? Like we have this idea that like it's too complex, it's too complicated. And I can tell you that when I first started out doing AAC, I had that belief. I was like, no, we don't need to work on articles. We don't need to work on grammar. And then I started realizing that my students will learn whatever I teach them. And it makes sense to start targeting morphemes and corphemes, if you will. It's also really nice when you're working in classrooms or in group settings where you have individuals with mixed language skills. So maybe some, of the individuals that you're working with already know the word go. It's an opportunity to teach both, the word go and the morphological changes as a way to include all of the students. Again, with mixed language levels, I find this particularly useful for classroom teachers and classroom staff. There's no reason we can't simply show the morphological change. And so many of my students have shocked me with their ability to learn these morphological endings. Because if you think about it, they're hearing it, right? We're saying going, we're modeling go and saying going. So when you teach them how to say going, it's really powerful because then it's matching what they're hearing us say. So don't discount the corphemes because I've been surprised myself at how easily and quickly students can pick this up.
So Bethany says, need a shirt with that phrase on it. Awesome. How many people are sick of Chris Pratt right now? Have you watched him? The last thing I'll say about corphemes is there's a math exercise related to it. So a way to structure, don't run out of the room. Why is everyone leaving when I said math? No. I'm just kidding.
Trigger.
There's a strategy for teaching core vocabulary, and it's called Word of the Week. Is anyone doing Word of the Week? It's a way of structuring it, right? So Word of the Week, do the math, right? We have, in a school district, right, we probably have 40 weeks, right? So again, in an adult setting, you maybe have the entire year. But if you're only picking 1 or 2 words a week, and you have 40 weeks, how many words can you get to? 40 to 80 words, right? So that's, in an entire school year, 40 to 80 words is not enough time. You need to compound that in some way. So instead of focusing just on go and stop, that's what we say, okay, well, what we're going to teach is not core word of the week, but core theme of the week. So now we've got go and stop, but we also have going and stopping, and we can build that into our instruction.
So here's some resources if you want to learn more about core vocabulary. There's tons out there. These are just some of our favorites. I also wanted to mention Project Core. For students that you're working with visual impairments, Project Core has high contrast symbols, which we know can be a strategy for low vision. They also have 3D printed symbols. So definitely check out Project Core. I mean, they have amazing modules on core vocabulary, and it's a great resource. But I wanted to specifically shout that out. Someone had asked me, and we were talking about low vision, and so that's a really great, powerful resource.
Okay, so yes.
I want to mention something about the project for basic 36 icon. On the Project Core 36 icon basic board that they provide, I mean, they have lots of options, but the most, I guess, common one that you can access, it isn't color-coded. It's not, the verbs aren't green and the question words aren't blue. It's just black and white for the most part. It's just not, the backgrounds are just white.
Mhm.
And I find that when I show that to a colleague or a parent versus one that is color coded based on the different systems of color coding, their eye is really, they find it more overwhelming when it doesn't have the color coding. So I was just going to say, I love AAC systems that have a very clear color coding based on parts of speech. And the
Fitzgerald key. The Fitzgerald key.
The Fitzgerald key, yeah. Or the different, there's
The technical.
others,
There's
yeah.
modified, or is that what it's called?
There's like
Yeah.
McDonald or whatever the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
versions. But I do really condone the Project Core modules, and I think it's a great basic training for everyone to understand why we would use a low-tech core board, for example, as for like universal support, visual support for everyone in the classroom.
Foreshadowing, we're going to talk about communication boards, and I completely agree with you. Actually, I do some customization with some of the programs that I use to make them easier and more visually appealing, and one of them is making sure that I'm using a modified Fitzgerald key or a Fitzgerald key. I do think that it helps both the adults and also the students. So yeah, those are like tweaks that you could make, and you start noticing over time, like, wow, that really made a difference. So I completely agree. Okay.
Ready?
Keep on keeping on.
All right. The other important thing about core vocabulary, and this goes back a little bit to our Jamboard discussion of things you could say to people to get them on board, is this guy's story. So this is a video that we're not going to watch, but again, go back and watch it afterwards, that Gail Van Tatenhove gave us permission to share. So I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of this. This gentleman in this picture is in a group home, and he had the great benefit of having Gail Van Tatenhove as his speech therapist. And so Gail Van Tatenhove taught him how to use his communication device and generate sentences, word by word, core theme by core theme, to say whatever he wants to say whenever he wants to say it, right? It's not all grammatically perfect, but again, he can say whatever he wants to say. So he... one day, she comes to visit him, and this is what the video shows, and he says, they don't come. They don't feed me. They say, do not tell. And he essentially composes on his communication device a report of neglect that he was able to explain to Gail, who could then go take the appropriate actions to change that. And that's this guy's story. What we want to impress upon you is the next slide, which is if you look at the statistics of the abuse rates of people with disabilities in general, not just those who are not yet speaking or not speaking at all or don't have access to AAC, just people with disabilities, it is a lot higher. It says the rate of violent victimization against persons with disabilities was nearly 4 times the rate of persons without disabilities. And so the really big phrase on this slide is, care now in no way ensures care always. Meaning the people I work with, I don't think they're going to be neglecting the students they work with. They're not going to be abusing the students in any way. And they might often be providing really awesome care. But when they leave, when they transition, Daryl, to the next place, if we haven't got them as close to snug as possible as a shield for themselves, as a protection mechanism, then then we might be setting them up for an environment where they could be abused. So, and sadly, the statistics bear that out, right? So this is why we press upon the importance of core vocabulary so people can defend themselves.
And I'll just add to that, actually. I just did an interview for the podcast with Gemma White, who's actually been on the podcast before. She had a session at AAC in the Cloud, which, by the way, is an amazing free online AAC conference that happens every single year. They have amazing speakers. Her session was entitled, "Where's the Penis?" And she reached out and she's like, I want to talk about, body awareness, body autonomy, and the whole conversation we talked about self-advocacy. So having that vocabulary programmed into an AAC system and then doing teaching around that, and alongside of that, teaching self-advocacy skills. Like, in order to prevent abuse, we need to teach individuals, how to communicate, right? What's going on in their bodies. This starts from very young age with small children all the way through the lifespan, making sure individuals have access to that kind of language. Because exactly like it says, care now in no way ensures care always. And it's definitely something that as educators we can be cognizant of and thinking about.
You work with a lot of parents too, and this seems to be a fear, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like my heart goes out to parents who have children who are non-speaking, and they're sending them away from their home, and they're trusting that, the school will take care of them. And most of the time that's true, but when you have a child who's not able to communicate what happened, how scary that must be as a family. And that's actually a way to try to get buy-in. If you have a family with a child who is a complex communicator, it's like, I want them to be able to tell you everything that's going on, when they don't feel good, when they're upset, what happened during their day. It's the number one thing parents say to me. I say, what are your goals? Like, what are your hopes and dreams for your child? And they're like, I just want to know what they do. I want to know if something bad happened to them. It's a parental need to know what's going on with your child. And so, when we give kids access to AAC that's robust, when we do our due diligence in teaching self-advocacy skills, we really are, helping not only our kids, but our families feel, like they're safe, which is, a basic right. We should all feel safe, and we should all feel like our kids are safe. And communication is such a huge part of that we oftentimes take for granted, that you or I can just be like, the craziest thing happened, or I didn't like this, right? We have to teach those skills to our kids and our adults.
I have a quick question for those of you working with adults. Have you been impacted by the Great Resignation? Is that happening to you as well? What I mean by that is the turnover rate high, you've lost colleagues that you've worked with. So again, this is why it's really important, because you might be part of the Great Resignation, you might be leaving, or your colleagues might be leaving, and even though the person is staying in that, the client is staying in that environment, the new personnel might not. So again, that's why it's really important to teach them core vocabulary so they can protect themselves, because you don't know who's coming in behind you. Right?
So some more AAC user episodes to listen to. There's Brittany Dubé. She talks about part-time AAC use. Definitely check those out. Let's talk about key or personal fringe. Chris, what does that mean?
Yes, so fringe vocabulary, not all fringe vocabulary is built the same, right? Some words are used more frequently than others. A way that I often visualize it, we don't have a visualization on one of the slides, but I picture a giant circle, and in that circle is a center, is a smaller circle, and in that circle is core vocabulary. But in the larger circle, way out on the edges, are really fringe vocabulary, like
fringy fringe,
like armadillo, right? A friend of mine said AA, A-Y-E, A-Y-E. Or how about quokka? Does anyone know what a quokka is? No. See, these are really fringe words. If you don't know what a quokka is, treat yourself. Do a little Google search.
How do we even spell that?
Q-U-O-K-K-A.
Don't act like this is common knowledge, like everyone should be able to spell quokka.
People should know what a quokka is. It's like a groundhog in New Zealand, in Australia, off the coast of Perth. It's a small little island. Anyway, point is, really weird words out there on the fringes we don't say very. Are you looking now? Some people are looking up quokka. Look at the smile.
Like, must see what a quokka looks like.
Okay, but a quokka is like a groundhog, right? Okay, And an I is like a little marsupial monkey sort of thing. Anyway, these are really fringy words, right? Not all fringe words are. So when you picture this giant circle, they might be way out in the fringe, but closer to the center might be words like ice cream. You know, we might say that. Pizza might be something that's more towards the center, right? It's not out there like quokka, right? So there are some words when we're looking at, well, okay, nouns are the Mr. Yuck, but we're going to work on nouns sometimes. When do we work on nouns and which nouns do we work on? Why don't we pick the nouns that are really most important to the individual person? So key vocabulary or personal fringe, key vocabulary really gets the idea that certain times of year, certain nouns come into popularity, right? Like we're moving into October, you know what's coming. My wife is super excited. You know what's coming. Pumpkin spice, exactly. You know it. You know my wife? Yeah.
You know Melissa?
Pumpkin spice, right? Pumpkin. So there's certain times of year nouns might move in like pumpkin and move out, right? There's certain geographic things here. What are some words you might say in Montana that we don't say in LA or in Virginia? Blizzard. What's that? Grizzly bear,
Ooh,
exactly.
Yeah, I don't say that.
What was that? Bison, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So avalanche.
Whoa.
Right?
Avalanche is here? Real? Wow.
Certainly we don't have
Montana.
those in Virginia. But then important to students and to AAC users might be words that are really relevant to them, right? So again, maybe if you had an AAC user here in Montana, you might be thinking about teaching the word avalanche or adding that to a communication device. If I lost my ability to speak and I needed a communication device tomorrow, a word that I would want to make sure is on my communication device, because my family says it a lot, is the word hurricane, right? Probably not a word you use a lot here in Montana, right? But why would it be important to me in Virginia? Yeah, but I'm in Virginia. We don't really have hurricanes that much. Might I have family that down in Florida? Yeah, maybe. They're a sports team, but I'm from Buffalo originally. Go Sabres. It's the dog's name, exactly, right? I don't want to be like, come here, dog, come here, dog. I want to be like, come here, hurricane, right? So hurricane, it would be really important to be on my communication device because we say it a lot in my house, right? Yeah, Jessica? Microphone? You're thinking about what would be important in my house.
So would that be the same with like one of the things I'm working on with one of my kiddos is they're very into music, and so I have an Alexa button that talks on her iPad. So would that be considered a key personal fringe?
The Alexa button does what?
It says Alexa.
And then you can say.
And then it says, then she can go to a song or she.
I think it's a great example, right? Great example. So Alexa is now programmed on the device, and then core vocabulary word would be play, right? So that's already going to be on, and then maybe another.
And then she goes into, I have her going into her choices of songs that she prefers.
I think that makes total sense for if it's really important to her and motivating for her, right, Rachel?
Yeah. You got to watch me do therapy yesterday with one of my kids, and we were talking about Lady Gaga, Pitbull, and all of the students' favorite songs. Because he would just like randomly be like, Fireball. And I was like, what? What's he saying, everybody? And they're like, oh, he loves the Pitbull song, Fireball. I'm like, oh, so we should teach him how to say Fireball by Pitbull. And so that's what we were working on literally yesterday.
So I don't know if we need to do this activity, do you think?
No.
You get the idea that these are the nouns that we might be working with, right, is what's important to the student. This might be also nouns we might add to the device if it's not already on there. It's what's important to the student and the family. All right, now to move on to a next strategy. This strategy is descriptive teaching. Now this again, this really I think also ties into that Applebee's comment we were talking about earlier and using for adults, right? Is that, and aphasia, by the way. This is going to work great for aphasia, is someone might see a noun and try to describe what that is because they have the word finding. That's a thing it's red and we eat it and you bite it and it grows and we pick them, and so that is a apple, but it could also be a tomato, cherry, strawberry, right? In this case, it's an apple, right? We could define it even further. We could go, okay, but you've narrowed down the search from whatever the word is by describing what it means. And note the describing words are core vocabulary. It's red, we eat it, you bite it, it grows, we pick them. These are core vocabulary words, as opposed to teaching the word, the noun, right? Or expecting the noun. This can, the person that is working with the communication partner working with the AAC user can phrase their questions and their words in a way that allows people to respond with what's on their AAC. So if I were to say, which planet is the biggest, then you only have one option. You have to figure out either how to find Jupiter on your communication device or spell it on your communication device. But there is only one right answer, it's Jupiter. But if and when I say right answer, I mean it's the only word that answers that question. But if you flip it around, so same thing, another question might be, who had a little lamb? Mary, right? So now you have to type out Mary, you have to have Mary on your communication device. But if you change your words and you say, tell me about Jupiter, now what could you do? Now they can say it's big, it's far, it's round. They can use open-ended questions. A great strategy is to start your phrases with tell me. Tell me about so-and-so, as opposed to which is or what is. What is going to be narrowing it down to a small bunch of answers. Tell me about gives open-ended questions. Cool.
I also want to add to that really quickly because the thought came into my brain, and I don't know if I'll have another opportunity to say it or I'll think of it again. Similar to this, when we're working with individuals with complex communication needs and we give corrective feedback, meaning, oh no, that's not a hippopotamus, that's a zebra, right? What we're inadvertently doing is shutting down communication for individuals where communication is already a challenge. It's already, sometimes I'm sure some of you guys feel like you're pulling teeth to get communication out of the individuals that you're working with. And so being really cognizant of not giving that corrective feedback, which we're going to talk a little bit about attributing meaning because that's a huge part of what we do in AAC is accepting all communication and then building off of it. And so I just wanted to kind of reiterate, if we want individuals with complex communication needs to communicate more, we can't shut down the communication that they're showing us. And that reminds me of this strategy because I feel like when we are structuring the way we're communicating with individuals, we can either do it in a really close-ended way where there's one right answer or one wrong answer, or we can open it up so that there's multiple answers and we just build off of whatever the individual is communicating to us.
So just as a quick strategy to visualize for adults and kids, let's go to that adult conversation about Applebee's for a second. Imagine taking the word Applebee's and putting it in the center of a Google slide, okay? And then branching out around Applebee's, tell me about Applebee's. What would it be? Food. What do we do at Applebee's? We eat there. So imagine a spoke coming off and say, we eat at Applebee's. Okay, what else about Applebee's? What was it? It's friends. We meet friends there. Could be another spoke off of this Applebee's wheel.
Go with friends.
Go with friends. Family dinners. So we eat dinner there with family. It could be a spoke off of this wheel. The exercise that we're doing is exactly what you could do with clients to learn about Applebee's, because they might have these word recall or not be able to find Applebee's on their communication device, or having Applebee's on a communication device is really fringy, right? But now if we could teach them, I want to go, I eat there, I'm a place with friends, it's loud, it's fun. Suddenly you're like, oh, you want to go out to eat? Is it Applebee's? Are you talking about Applebee's? Is that where you want to go, right? If they said red, you eat it because the icon, and you teach that part as another spoke. That is the strategy you could use to teach kids or adults about fringe vocabulary using the core vocabulary.
I have a student who's obsessed with Chick-fil-A, which so am I. But this student just loves Chick-fil-A, and it's an example of working with individuals who might have really limited interests or really interesting curiosities. We can really do deep dives into those things, right? It's not just like saying that I like to eat at Applebee's or Chick-fil-A or I go to Chick-fil-A. It's like talking all about Chick-fil-A and all the different menu items, and we're pulling the menu up, right? As a reminder that following an individual's lead and really diving down those rabbit holes with individual curiosities can be the best way to help our individuals start learning how to communicate about the things that actually matter to them. And so that's kind of where I start with individuals, and don't be afraid to kind of think of every different way that you can kind of talk about and learn how to communicate about a very specific interest.
Let's practice. Shall we practice? Because this is a skill that takes practice, right? Someone who's done it for a while, we could throw out a word and they can just rattle off all these different ways to describe a noun. So let's do one or two of these, you think, Rachel?
Yes.
All right, how about
we only have 15 minutes, and we still have to get to motor planning.
Okay. Volcano.
You also can use more than one word, by the way.
It's such a great thing.
Such a
It
layup.
happens every single time. People often equate, well, I'm going to replace the noun with a core vocabulary word, but really it's more than one core vocabulary word. So, eruptive, still kind of fringy, right? It's a verb, but hot, but lava is kind of fringy. Hot, red. Big, go out.
Ooh, that was a good one.
It is big. It goes out. Shake, disaster, dangerous, resting, sleeping, smoky, okay? Fire, yes, these are great ways to describe, because fire is, again, great example, fire is a noun, right? But fire is not going to be way out there on the fringe like volcano is. Fire is going to be closer to that center, right? We use fire for lots of stuff. It's much more likely that someone has an experience with fire than they do volcano. So you could use that word as a descriptive word. Let's do another one. Which one should we do?
Molecule.
Let's do molecule. It is small. Science, again, kind of fringy, right? That's a noun. Part of something. Small part.
Can't see. That
Can't
was a good
see
one.
it. And molecules might not be alive. But
Are they?
there's a good one in the chat. It looks like a Tinker
Nose?
toy. Okay, that gives some, if you have some background reference. Which one? Sarah.
Stole your
Sarah.
joke. You
Sarah.
stole it.
Sarah writes, Sarah knows the answer to this question is, why can't you trust a molecule? Because Sarah says they make up everything.
Ba-da-ba.
Dad joke.
Number one. There's only at least one.
They make up everything, or the way Sarah writes it, makes up all things, are core vocabulary words. Right? These are all common words that we use all the time. Right? So this is, again, takes practice. And then we have a little resource that you can use, like a little thing. You can list out some of the content words in a lesson, in a textbook. Again, for adult users, what are we, Applebee's would be a great example. What are some equipment we might use? And then as the support structure around them, what are the core vocabulary that might describe it, right? We go there, it smells, we flush when we go there. It needs to be cleaned. What am I talking about?
We've had the potty mind all day.
Yes.
Okay, I think I vote, Chris, we only have 15 minutes.
Okay.
We skip to motor planning, and then
Okay.
we take lunch.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, well, I don't know what we're skipping.
We're skipping so much good stuff, but we didn't even get to modeling.
Okay.
Look at us.
Okay.
All right, let's see. I'm gonna go. Doop. These are great resources to check out. Oh, here we are. Okay, component number 3.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Please
We're
go
skipping
back up.
phrasal verbs. We'll skip it.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
All right, are we gonna do our activity?
Yes.
Yes.
So
We need 2 volunteers, right?
We need 2 volunteers.
Yes. Dun, dun, dun. You pulling up your notes app?
What's that?
You pulling up the notes app?
I'm pulling up my notes app.
Okay. All right. Who's going to be the lucky volunteers? Okay, hold on. Chris, you're the chooser.
Oh.
How are we going to do this, though?
We got 1 and 2. You want to? Okay. Let's see. How are we going to do this? We'll bring the iPads to them.
Okay. Okay. It's set up right? Yeah?
Yeah. Hold on, mine's
Okay.
not.
And for those of you guys who are on the Zoom, just going to put your hands on the keyboard on the screen.
Okay. You don't really
Pretend.
need the mic.
Or
for
your
this.
real keyboard, actually.
Oh.
I feel like I'm going to go over here.
Okay. Let's,
I'm going to supervise.
can you? I have the high contrast on, but.
Uh-oh. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm supervising.
Yeah. Oh,
I
great.
mean, it's a contest, right?
Yeah.
I have to be the
Be
referee
judge.
here.
Yeah. Okay. What's on the screen is a QWERTY keyboard, right? Standard QWERTY keyboard. And what we gave the 2 volunteers is a open notes app and a QWERTY keyboard. And what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to ask you to race, okay? And see who can type this phrase the fastest, okay? And that phrase, Molly, is?
The werewolf came home.
Say done when you're done.
Done.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice job, Heather. Heather, have you seen this activity before? You've come before, right? I feel like we know each other. Okay, so well done, excellent. You were able to type it out pretty fast, right? What do we got there? A couple seconds, maybe 10 seconds or so, right? Fair? Right? Okay, now we're going to just change it a little
I'm
bit.
going to take the iPad really quickly and do secret things.
Can you pass that iPad back? We're going to, yes. What we're going to do is we're going to change it just a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. Maybe
All right.
Just a small little adjustment.
Redo the same sentence?
Yeah, let's do it.
Ready?
So we're going to do the same sentence, but there's a small change. We're not telling anyone what that change is yet. Okay? Ready?
Go.
Set.
We got to go. We got to go. It's go time.
Go.
Go. Came home. All right.
Note how much longer it took. It took approximately 25 seconds versus the 10. What we changed is the keyboard from a standard QWERTY keyboard to an AZERTY keyboard, where the letters are in a different spot, right? Where a Q typically is, there's an A, right? Not all the letters have changed. Some of them have changed, right? And what we saw is that it took a lot longer to type
You
the
both get
same
prizes.
thing. Good work, everybody.
It was a
Thank you.
competition, but everybody wins.
This is to the point you were making, right, earlier about motor planning, right? Is that by moving the letters around, it slows everybody down and screws things up. Just imagine if Rachel, she's been known to do this, snuck into your house, popped off the S on your keyboard and swapped it with the Z and just moved those 2 things around. And the next day you went to work. How pissed at Rachel would you be, right?
Don't be mad at me.
Your kid did that as like a April Fool's joke?
On my phone, they changed a word, so whenever I type that one word,
It replaces it? It's also a great prank.
something else. And I, for the life of me, was like, I know I spelled that right.
Yeah, it's the autocorrect. You can change it so whenever you, so what, I did it to my wife too. Like, whenever she types Chris, it says Captain Awesome. But the point is, you can be really fast because the buttons are in the same spot. And when they're not in the same spot, it's frustrating, it's annoying, it's harder. Can you relearn it? Sure, you could relearn it, but it's going to take time, and you're really going to be angry at Rachel for moving those around. I would never do that, Rachel.
Hey.
So when it comes to AAC, what that means is don't move the buttons around. You want to keep them in the same spot. Moving them around makes it harder to locate, to find. If you have a visual impairment, anybody, but it's especially if you have a visual impairment. Now you've got to search through and try and find them again, right? Like that's, but if it's always in the same spot, you don't have to rely on that. You can rely on your motor planning.
The other analogy I like, which someone had mentioned, we all use LAMP, right? Our phones, our smartphones. I can go to Facebook in my sleep because I'm there way too often throughout the day. I don't have to search for it. I'm just like, and I'm here again. How did this happen? If I were to pick up Chris's phone, I would have to scan for that little blue icon, or I would have to search Facebook. I'd have to type it in. The same thing happens with AAC. And so, think about how frustrating it is to go say something and then the word isn't there or it's in a different place. So that analogy can be really helpful when you're teaching about the importance of motor planning. We all can kind of have the experience of trying to search for Google Maps when we're in the middle of driving with someone, like, where's your Google? Where's your camera? I don't know, I need to search for it. And this kind of ties into the conversation about picture exchange. This is probably my biggest, I have a lot of gripes with picture exchange, PECs. But think about the way we set this up for individuals. We have a book of pictures, and then we pull out a few different options, and the first time maybe it's crackers, cookie, juice, but then the next day it's juice, crackers, cookie. So we're relying entirely on visual discrimination, which is hard. The same way looking at my iPhone to try to find Facebook, or his iPhone to try to find Facebook, it's taxing. Cognitively, visual attention-wise. So, we need to make sure that we're considering motor planning when we're thinking about AAC. PECS doesn't typically do that. It's typically different every single time, and then we wonder why our kids are frustrated when we pull it out and they're not using it. Well, if juice was always in the same place, and they could learn it's always at the bottom, right, and cookies is always at the top, then they'd have more success over time. So when you're thinking about any type of communication, we're always using motor planning, whether that's I think of a word and I motor plan my mouth to say that word, or I motor plan on a device. And it's really actually cool to see when you have a student who, demonstrates that they've learned the motor plan, right? Like they think that they're in a different folder and then their hand goes somewhere and then they kind of self-correct. You can see motor planning in action. We're really trying to build repetition with those motor plans so that when I think of a word, I find myself to that word. The same way when I think of a word, it just comes out of my mouth. So hopefully that makes sense in a way to kind of talk about motor planning. Go ahead.
Would that also be the same? Would visual also play a key in that? Even if the icon is in the same place, if you change that icon and it doesn't look the same, does that tie into motor planning?
Well, really, typically what happens when any of us are learning anything, right? When we all got devices like our phone, for example, or AAC. We're a communication partner helping a student. We've never seen LAMP words for life. We need to learn the motor plans. At first, we are using visual discrimination. We're scanning, trying to find, eat. Eventually, after enough practice with that word, we think eat, and then we access that with our hand. We've learned the motor plan. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm going to add to it too.
Yeah.
I'd say changing the visual could screw somebody up because it's a recall, or a recognition network. What I mean is I might be like I have a QWERTY keyboard in front of me, and I sometimes just look down there quickly to orient myself. Now, if the visual had changed, it's going to screw it up a little bit. I could still relearn it. So I would try and keep those visuals as consistent as possible. But it's less burdensome than moving it all around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just was.
Yeah, so, thank you for waiting.
I was just wondering about if I was going to try and color code the visuals that are currently being used when they haven't been in the past, would that be a positive or a negative?
Positive.
Yeah, I would agree. And also, for if you're working with individuals with visual impairment, like Chris said, having an anchor. I have a student with visual impairment, and we have a red. The button at the bottom is red because he finds that anchor point, and then he's able to kind of see everything else. So, I think that color coding and things like that can help as we're learning the motor plans, right? So, because we transitioned from visual discrimination to motor plans, assuming the buttons stay in the same place. So yeah, I think it's a great thing to use as a strategy. Okay. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so when we're doing an eval, I know one of the questions we get asked is, can the child discriminate? But I feel like you're saying that's not necessary. They do not have to be able to discriminate.
We have to show pictures. We have to do the picture stuff after. We have to.
I know, we do.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah, no, right. What you just said is exactly it. No, you don't have to know how to discriminate. We get to teach you what those symbols mean. Not, hey, here's this symbol that, yeah, well, you'll see that when we do pictures.
I'll add to that. It's not to say that I don't assess for that when I'm doing an assessment, but by no means is it like criterion to say like, yes, the system works or no, it doesn't. Same thing with moving the buttons around. During an assessment only, will I move an icon around to see if there's field preferences? Like, oh, he's completely neglecting the left side. That's important information during assessment, but it's not something that I would ever do during implementation. So there are some things that I'm looking for during an assessment, but only during an assessment, just to give information about what I'm observing and what I'm seeing.
I might also suggest you can often get that information from talking to the team. Yeah, we know that he can never go to his left side, right? But Rachel might be meeting a kid for the first time and doing an assessment and not have access to the whole team. So if you have access to the team, you could be asking them, and they can narrow that down. Yeah, we found that the left side is really not. Okay, we're almost at lunch.
Here's our man, Chris.
So again, where do we learn this? Is Chris Klein is like, don't move the buttons around. I have learned how to use my big toe to move to access, and as soon as I have to move the buttons around, I have to start all over again. He also used a great analogy is that in one of our podcast episodes, he's like, when you're a speaking individual, learned to say certain sounds with these motor movements, the ones around your mouth, your articulators. Cat has said little variations for co-articulation, but for the most part, it's said the same exact way your entire life. So that analogy for an AAC user would be, give me the robust language, give me all the words, and don't move them around. Keep them in the same spot. That said, there's a little bit of a gut punch coming here just before lunch. Right?
Are we going to gut punch before lunch or after lunch?
Right now. Come on, let's do it right now.
All right, I'm fast forwarding.
Yeah.
All right. I really wanted to go over that.
Well, okay. Do you want to do that?
Can I?
Let's do that when we come back.
Okay. But were we going to gut punch before or after lunch?
I think a gut punch right before
All right,
lunch is what they
fine,
need.
great. This one, here it is.
So here's a question. What's the implications of a core vocabulary board with randomly placed words? Meaning, what you see here is a board that has, it's a, let's see, 6 by 4, so 24 words, randomly placed core vocabulary words. What's the implications with core vocabulary and motor planning on a core board like this? User attention, maybe.
It's not universal, it's less universal.
Less universal. Again, if the end game is say whatever you want to say, whatever you want to say it. Chris Klein has said, don't move the buttons around. Right? Then what's going to happen? So if I give somebody a core board with random words on it, right? Random, when I say random, I mean they're core vocabulary words, but they're sort of randomly placed, right? And I think someday they're going to use something more than that core vocabulary board, and we should all be thinking that because that's the least dangerous assumption, right? You can't say everything with a core board. We're expecting them to have to relearn the motor plans. So if you go from a core board to a robust communication system on a dynamic screen, and those core words are randomly placed, then they're going to have to relearn where those words are. So the big takeaway here is don't use a random core board. What should you use instead? If you can, use a robust system, right? Start there, but there's some barriers there that might, so what could you use as an intermediary? Use a core board, but use it as the home screen of that device. So if it was LAMP Words for Life, you think you're going to be going LAMP Words for Life, let's use that as the core board. If we're going to be using Proloquo, let's use that as the core board. Does that make sense? Because now they're keeping the buttons in the same spot. I don't have to relearn them when I head over to my robust system.
Got it. Everyone got a sufficient gut punch before lunch?
The reason that's a gut punch is because we see it a lot. People have placed random core boards because they learned core vocabulary, and yeah, that's cheap. Let's put them on core boards and give them out there to everybody. We can do that. But if you're really believing the end game is snug and they can say something, then you're thinking they'll have to change that at some point, and that is going to be, we just learned how frustrating that can
You
be.
have a question, Jessica?
Final thoughts, Jessica, before we? All right, well, come up during lunch and we'll reiterate them because we're already over time.
Okay.
We are over time.
Yes.
And we know there's a tour. Go on the tour.
We have lots of fun things. Molly, tell them what they can go to during this lunch. Tell them what they've won, Molly.